OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
It is 7:30. This is OTB AM, and a very happy Monday to you, especially to you if you are a goalkeeper. Congratulations, your art form has reached a whole new height. And it was a story in 3 parts over the course of the weekend for goalkeepers. On Saturday in the GEA, we had Niall Morgan coming up for Donegal kickouts, and I thought to myself, God, we're going to be starting off Monday morning talking about goalkeepers. And I was right, but we weren't going to be talking about Niall Morgan, it turned out. Maybe we're going to be talking about Kasper Schmeichel, who essentially won the FA Cup for Leicester City after Tielemans' unbelievable goal on Saturday evening. 2 amazing saves from Kasper Schmeichel. I thought we might be sitting here talking about him this morning. But no, it is a third goalkeeper we're starting OTB AM off with this morning, because Nathan Murphy almost broke his microphone at the Hawthorns yesterday.
Alexander-Arnold whips it in. Alisson scores! Unbelievable! The goalkeeper has scored in the 94th minute. You've never seen anything like it. Alisson for Liverpool to keep alive their top 4 hopes, and nobody can quite believe what they have seen. West Brom 1, Liverpool 2. You're not mishearing me. The goalkeeper, Alisson, heads into the back of the net. Wow, a goal from the gods by Alisson.
Jerry Gilroy, what a moment.
Game set and match Becker. That's my favourite headline this morning. There's lots of boring Alice in Wonderland headlines, but game set and match Becker is the tab of the morning to you, and I think it's the mirror with this sensational stuff, really. And it's interesting that Nathan says a goal from the gods, because that's also the other headline. It's the head of God, because Becker talks about how this is how God manifests. I mean, you kind of have to be a believer to get on board with that. But in that one moment, you can see why he's reached for that. And I mean, it's ridiculous. Like last week, we were blah blah blahing away 3 wins for Liverpool. Oh well, it's Big Sam and West Brom, and they're already down. They're on the beach. They're definitely going to win this game. And they didn't. They didn't definitely win the game. They needed the 95th minute winner from the goalkeeper, who's coming up at the very end of the game, where the whole team has literally lost its spirit. Like Sadio Mane's face as the ball goes out again and again in the last 10 minutes. Is like, oh, we're not going to do this. This is gone from us now. So I don't know. I mean, there's still 2 games left for them to screw this up. And the last game is against Roy Hodgson, probably his last ever game as a Premier League manager. And Palace looked a bit sticky against Villa yesterday, winning 3-2 in the end. So I don't know. I mean, there's going to be a few twists and turns in the race for the top 4. At the same time, would you be disinclined to bet on them winning next season's Champions League at the moment? I'd like to know what odds they are.
Or the Premier League. I genuinely think Liverpool are a contender next season, but that's maybe a story for another day. Just to go back to Alisson, there was this really boring narrative out there, which probably still exists, maybe, if we actually drill down into the statistics, but there was this narrative out there that bringing a goalkeeper up for a corner was just a waste of time, because you have your set piece, you've practiced it in training week in, week out, and chances are Alisson Becker is not involved in the practice for a corner. So he actually disrupts things when he comes up for a goalkeeper. That was certainly the narrative out there. But Jurgen Klopp was like, screw that, go up, get involved. And I'm just happy that that was proven to be the most zero-crack narrative in the history of football. Bring the goalkeepers up, let them get involved, let them do a Peter Schmeichel, and now it'll be forever known as let them do an Alisson Becker. The first headed goal ever by a Premier League goalkeeper.
Is it? I didn't know that. So they normally just scissors kick it to the net from a metre out after a goal-mouth scramble. Is that what happens?
Or they're playing in Stoke and the wind is at their back and the ball bounces over the opposition keeper from a goal kick. They're the 2 scenarios, yeah, a volley or a half volley or a quarter volley, or yes, a wind, a gust from the gods that takes it over the opposition goalkeeper's head, but not like yesterday. And like what a header it was is the thing here. It had to be directed into the far corner in just brilliant fashion, like Steven Gerrard in Istanbul.
The post-match interview suggested that it wasn't Klopp who was urging him to get up there at all. It was somebody else's name I didn't recognise. I can't remember now.
Pep Linders, is it?
Perhaps. And the fact was that I don't know, anyway, so he claims when the ball is flighted over, he's like, I need to get that into the far post now, because that's exactly the bit that's not being protected. So, I mean, do you suddenly change things and start bringing Alisson up if this is as good as he is at heading the ball from corners? Like, it was, hang on, do you just bring him up all the time? And maybe that narrative of he claims that he practices sometimes. So I don't know. Very, very strange. Absolutely brilliant. And sorry, I mean, I see what you've done here, Eoin. I'm watching you. The person in the world, in world sport, who was most happy with the fact that Alisson scored that goal yesterday, none other than Peter Keane, because it meant that we're not all talking about the hat-trick of David Clifford. It meant that we're not all talking about how amazing the Kerry footballers' response has been to being dumped out of the championship. This is the first time that we've seen them, and they were absolutely sensational on Saturday. They were incredible. All their best young players playing really well, strength and depth in the forward line. We know the defence wasn't the problem last year. We knew that somehow getting confidence into the rest of the forwards was going to be important. And there it is. It's like mushrooms overnight, just cropped up a bunch of new forwards. There's a Clifford cousin coming off the bench and kicking points too. What's going on? I mean, Peter Keane is absolutely thrilled that Alisson Becker scored a headed goal. So instead of us leading with the hat-trick, which we should be, there's this other story of similar importance.
Well, I knew
sport right now.
I knew you would say this, so I went out of my way at the top of the show to point out that David Clifford doesn't even make it into the top 3 stories over the course of the weekend. Niall Morgan and Kasper Schmeichel are stories number 2 and 3. So it's time to talk about Kasper Schmeichel now. No, I'm only joking. We can't talk about David Clifford for as long as you want. Tommy Rooney's got on the dock here the quote of the weekend from Peter Keane. That result could have gone the other way just as handily, which is he is trolling the universe at this stage. That is on a level above Johnny Cooper saying Carlow were going to be a tough opponent when they got drawn against each other in that championship draw. So not only has that happened, Peter Keane is going around trolling people. I know there is a hotkey of you at the end of last year saying Kerry won't be within an arse's roar of the championship this year. So I'm sticking with your opinion at the end of last year, because you've got a good record. You've got a good record in these crystal ball things. So I will bow to your wisdom on where Kerry are going to be this year.
I don't know. I think new information came to light, I believe, is what the dude would say in a circumstance like this, and the forwards are playing well. All joking aside, you must have been pretty happy with the performance, because let's face it, there were concerns at the end of last year about whether or not this team was going to bed in and be capable of producing a performance like that.
Yeah, they were up against the worst team I've ever seen in modern Division 1. That is not hyperbole. It was genuinely the worst performance by a team I've ever seen in modern Division 1. Genuinely, you have to go, the record suggests that you have to go back to the time when Kilkenny and London and Waterford played in Division 2, and if a team like Kerry happened to get relegated, they would end up playing them by some brutal coincidence. And that was the magnitude of the victory the other day. If Dublin came up against that Galway team on Saturday, it would have been 8-40. And there's no getting away from that. And when you get into them in the performance rankings, but that is a massive factor. It was this weird social experiment where Pádraig Joyce was like, what would happen if we let some of these really good forwards play with one man beside them with 40 yards of open space in front of them? Well, they got their answer. That is why we saw what we saw on Saturday. Now, of course, it's incredibly pleasing to see forwards take advantage of those opportunities. But maybe these are the sort of things that we see that actually occur in challenge matches that we are not privy to. There is every chance that Galway come back over the next few weeks and they're like, yeah, that was just a complete phony war on our part. We were just playing around.
Yeah, well, if you look at how Galway played against Mayo twice last season in the space of 4 or 5 weeks, and the difference between the first game and the second game, it's chalk and cheese. Was it an 18-point difference? I can't really remember what the full winning margin was, but they lost the Connacht final by a single point, and so they know how to put the defensive structure in place at the touch of a button, given all the work that Kevin Walsh has done over the years before this management team came in. So I wouldn't be too worried about that. But legitimately, and I know you're trying to deflect and diffuse the attention here, that is one of those performances that just gives a team the confidence to go on. Now, maybe next week they try and dampen things down and they do a mad training session on the morning of the game to make sure that they don't overrun the next opponents. But it feels like this is a Kerry team who have got the confidence they needed to build on the All-Ireland final performance from now 2 years ago. And also, it strikes me that they're far more a summer team than a depths of winter team, when you have youthful exuberance and you have ball-playing talent and skill that isn't going to somehow be equalised in the weather. Because let's face it, Cork, no great shakes either. Put to the sword by Kildare, mighty Kildare, who, all of a sudden I think are going to be licking their chops about what's going on in Leinster, right? Because that's a 50-50 championship any day of the year. That result could definitely go either way.
John Achterberg, the goalkeeping coach, was who you were thinking of a moment ago, Ger, when it came to... Yeah, Emma was just tipping us off there. So, that's even more impressive that the goalkeeping coach was involved in this, because it would suggest that there's some sort of method to the madness of what happened. It is this incredible moment which marks this mad season. We are going to have Nathan with us after 8 o'clock this morning to talk us through his out-of-body experience that seemed to happen last night. It's a brilliant piece of commentary. We're going to be playing it for you again and again and again this morning. It is 20 to 8 on this Monday morning. OTB AM live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. As you can see, the performance rankings coming in just a moment. Football with Nathan, and then Vinny Perth from 8 to 8:15. Cyril Farrell is going to join us at 8:30. Who stole our game is the front page of the Irish Examiner sports section this morning. We'll be asking Cyril Farrell, who stole hurling? Alan Quinlan will be with us at 8:45 to reflect on the fact that the Rainbow Cup is all of a sudden a good sports competition, and Anthony Moyles will be up after 9 o'clock to reflect on the Gaelic football weekend. Brian Kerr and the Sunday papers then from 9:30 to 10. We would love to hear from you this morning. You can tweet us at Off The Ball, or you can comment on the YouTube stream if that is where you're watching, and we would love to get your thoughts on the performance rankings.
That wasn't an All-Ireland winning performance.
Probably should have won the game based on their second half performance.
Is it a step too far to say it was the performance so far of the World Cup? Maybe not.
OTB AM's performance rankings with Gillette.
I'm scratching my head. Our performances was just lacked that intensity.
Every Monday morning on OTB AM, we're looking for your suggestions around the performance rankings. Enter and you will be in with a chance to win a Gillette starter pack. We'll pick out the winner before 9:30 this morning, and you can tweet us at Off The Ball. You can comment on our Instagram stories, and you can WhatsApp us as well. 087 9 180 180, 087 9 180 180. So any of your suggestions that are either in these five or outside of these five, we would warmly welcome. Let's have a look at what is on the colour scale today. So the bad, the good, the grand. So Galway football is in the bad here. We've kind of touched on this already, Ger, but do Galway in a weird way almost have learned experience of how to be so bad in a league game and then turn it around in a few weeks' time? It's just because we can't say for sure this is their season gone. It was just so astonishingly bad. It was worse than the Mayo performance last year in many ways, with such quality in the squad. I thought that as a result of what happened last year in the league, they would have been much better primed for the weekend, because maybe they felt that, sure, they closed the gap on Mayo when it came to the championship, but maybe that 1 point defeat becomes a draw game or a narrow win for Galway. Had they won the league game, had there been that little bit of a psychological boost of beating Mayo, or just not getting hammered by Mayo. So I can't see a world in which Galway would deliberately underprepare or deliberately try to be cute about this year's league. It's a tough division. They're in with Kerry and Dublin. They don't want to get relegated. There's no benefit to what happened last weekend. So I'm just putting this down as a horrific performance, which is not to say that they're not going to bounce back. But I'm astonished, especially after listening to Michael Meahan on the show last week, when the sounds were pretty positive around this football team.
The sounds were really positive, and the sounds were really positive on the Andy Moore and Paddy Andrews football pod as well. There was a sense that there was a bunch of new young players coming through, that they had some returning players, particularly around the midfield area, who were going to help. And there was no evidence of that in the game against Kerry at the weekend. You would say that of all the years, I don't think teams care about getting relegated this year in many ways, because who knows what the format is going to actually be next year. And if you're a management team who is facing down the barrel of a competitive provincial championship and a pathway to an All-Ireland semi-final where you've got to be tuned in from the very second that championship starts, then I think that if you're Galway, the point you made earlier on, challenge matches, this is a challenge match for them. And so therefore, getting hockeyed in a game like this is probably less relevant. Would they, if they were in the championship against Kerry, allow Clifford to be given the freedom of the pitch the way he was? Would they not have put some defensive structure in place? So that's the one thing that makes me think that this is less relevant from a Galway perspective in the long run than we might, this is Overreaction Monday. We're allowed to overreact to stuff because we have so little evidence available to us. First game out, I think that it's pretty easy for us to overreact to it. If they get hockeyed again in the league, I don't think it really matters, because I think that management team in particular, very smart, like really understand defensive structures as well. I know that the Let's Restore Galway to their swashbuckling best was kind of the ticket on which Pádraig Joyce was elected manager. But, Dively, for example, very, very smart football man, fully understands how a defence is supposed to function and what role the stopper is supposed to have, and what role the creator is supposed to have. And I thinking about it, and I think that the best point that you made so far was that point when we were talking at the top of the show about this is what happens in matches that we never get to see. But all of a sudden, some teams are going to be treating this as an opportunity. If you're Dublin, for example, you need to hit the ground running here because you won't have a meaningful game until the All-Ireland semi-final. If you're Galway, you need to taper up to a point where over the course of the Connacht Championship, you're peaking for those big games. And so I can see how they're in the red, though. And I can see how if you're a Galway supporter, you're like, so we conceded 323 against Mayo in the league last year. It's a lot of goals that we're shipping. How do we stop that?
Yeah, like that is why they're in the red, is that they do have such a talented management team, it seems, and such a talented group of players, that this was a massive underperformance. And you don't need to be trying to keep your cards close to your chest to put in place a defensive system that might stop you from leaking 10 proper goal chances, because you might not be able to go as far as describing Kerry as clinical on Saturday. That is the really worrying thing for Galway, that I'm telling you, Dublin would have scored more goals, much more goals on Saturday, which is the remarkable thing. We're going to come back to this in just a moment. We should touch on Chelsea here, who are also in the red this morning, hammered 4-0 yesterday in the Champions League final. They were down 4-0 by the 36th minute. So this capped off a terrible, terrible weekend for Chelsea in both men's and women's football, where all of a sudden, Ger, it's looking like, could Chelsea bottle this conclusion to the season to the point where they don't qualify for next season's Champions League, they don't win the Champions League, they don't win the FA Cup, and Thomas Tuchel almost kind of has to start all over again next season with a bunch of players who will look as if they're not good enough going into this summer's transfer window?
It'd be really interesting if they did bottle everything, wouldn't it? Because the bit where we were anointing Tuchel, and we were guilty of it, where we were anointing Tuchel the next super manager and Chelsea automatic contenders next season, that could go a bit pear-shaped really quickly over the next 2 weeks. I mean, over the next 36 hours. If Leicester beat them again, and Leicester therefore would essentially be qualified and home and hosed for the Champions League, how will we feel about what Tuchel has done? I mean, I think he's done an excellent job to improve the side from when Lampard was there, and he has not picked any of these players. He has not helped to shape the squad, and maybe he doesn't want to play with a 36-year-old centre-back, and maybe he doesn't feel like that's the best way for him to build a league-winning side and a Champions League winning side. But it was a weird performance from Chelsea against Leicester at the weekend. It wasn't that swashbuckling performance that we've seen. It was like Leicester had worked them out, and it was. I mean, I think Brendan Rodgers was absolutely sensational and has been sensational since the moment he arrived at Leicester. And just because he tells everybody he's sensational, that doesn't mean he isn't sensational. And I don't know, really interesting game, really interesting sequence of matches now at the end of a Premier League season where we've known who the winners have been essentially since I don't know, halfway through that 15-game winning run that Man City had. So hats off to Leicester, and squeaky butt time for Chelsea.
And a terrible jersey as well, to make everything way worse. Like, this was almost like what Chelsea did to Manchester City in the FA Cup semi-final. Leicester kind of did a similar job to them, but it just felt totally different. It felt like this was not football as we have come to know it. This was something different. This was an event. Like, I'm not sure. I think I found myself like drifting towards my phone quite a lot this season because the life of the game just has not existed without fans. And all of a sudden, Saturday felt like the most important sporting event in the world, the FA Cup of all things, involving Chelsea, who really are not necessarily a club that too many neutrals care too much about. I was absolutely rooting against them with every passing moment because of the fact that there was this massive energy inside Wembley Stadium. It was an amazing TV event.
It was incredible, absolutely incredible. I think the VAR decision in the video that's doing the rounds of the Chelsea fans filming themselves as they celebrate the equaliser And, how ironic the comic book villain was going to end up being Chilwell from a Leicester City fan's perspective, and the happiness. And then all of a sudden this dread silence falls over them, and you just hear expletives being shouted as VAR scratches off the goal for an offside, which looks pretty marginal. And when do you stop the video? Do you stop it after the ball leaves the foot, or is it like when he makes contact with it, or is those frames? I don't know. VAR is like not great, right? And we'll get into this with the hurling conversation a little bit later on as well. But having the fans there completely transformed that game. Like, I'm not going to lie. I watched most of the Villa game on the highlights, and the lack of celebration when they equalised at one stage was like, this definitely feels like a training grounds match. This definitely feels like a challenge match compared with the previous day when there were fans, and the difference it's going to make to all these teams. Like, this has absolutely been a year of phony war, and how grateful we were that there was that phony war. But now that we see what the difference fans make, the fleshy jiggle of the fans in the stands, it's the greatest sight in world sports.
Yeah, like I want to live my life with the confidence that Ben Chilwell had to celebrate his former team, against his former team, knowing that he was on the offside line and the fact that it was an own goal. To have that confidence to actually go all out and celebrate that, thinking that there was going to be no repercussions or no U-turn possibly in that. I just want to have that level of confidence. I think it's this magnificent moment. The video you were talking about with the Chelsea fans in the stand is obviously the highlight of the season for so many reasons. And I mean, the owner being brought onto the pitch afterwards. Like, I wish they did that in American sports, where like Tom Brady would be like, do we bring our owner out? Is our owner a dickhead or is he not? Nah, he's all right. Come on out. And they allowed them to do that in American sports. That's essentially what happened on Saturday. Leicester were like, our owner is good. Everybody else watching this, particularly you, the sneaky six, all of your owners are bad. So let's show off our shiny owner, who's great and way better than your owner. I just loved that moment. I thought it was class. And all of a sudden, like these things that we would sneer at in the past about, I don't know, the crowd and the fans and the passion that's attached to British football, I think we've all realised that actually they're really, really, really important. It was brilliant. But Chelsea, though, not so brilliant. They are in the bad this week. You mentioned the hurling. Let's get on to that. It's in the orange this week because there were a couple of great moments, as there is in every hurling weekend. Galway were particularly good. We're going to have Cyril Farrell with us a little bit later on. But this is like that VAR Monday. Do you remember when there was like 1 million penalties given in the Premier League, and it was like Brexit debate all over again when VAR that Monday was just international news. Everybody was debating it. This is that Monday for hurling. As I say, the front of the Examiner, who stole our game, is probably a question that sums up the mood of a lot of managers. John Kiley in particular, desperately unhappy, especially when it comes to some of the Galway simulation, which I had imagined won't go down well with Galway hurling fans.
Like we talked at length several times in the build-up to this about if you absolutely imbue every free within a certain area with the potential for there to be a penalty, then players are going to take advantage of that opportunity. And at the slightest hint of contact, they're going to go down to make sure the referee understands that there was contact and this foul was cynical, and so therefore it stopped a goal-scoring opportunity. It is in every sport. It is literally, it's the picture you paint for the referee, is how rugby talk about it. And generally it's like, oh, you've got to paint a good picture. But equally, there are those people who are trying to make sure that you're painting a bad picture, the dark arts, they call it. In football, it's diving. And was the intended consequence that you would introduce the art of the dive into hurling and football? I think it probably wasn't. And so therefore, this is definitely one of those, the cane toads have been released into the Australian society. Let's see what happens. Well, they're going to grow fat and bulbous and take over. That's what happened. Like, we've all seen the Simpsons episode, right? So, look, I don't know. I just feel... I feel two things about this. One, the hurling managers have notoriously been the most conservative and anti-change of any of the groups in history in Ireland. And let's face it, we're a super conservative country. So that's saying something. I don't think they've ever seen a rule change that they liked. So you've got to bear that in mind. And then the other thing is that they might be right about this. There's a possibility that there's some hybrid version where you do need to punish the cynical fouling that we saw, and you also need to allow the game to get, like, to be close to the perfection that it was. So what's the answer, Eoin?
Yeah, I know it's that, like, we might try and tease this out with Cyril Farrell later. We will try and tease it out later on, but whether or not we're going to arrive at an answer remains to be seen. I see Anthony Daly in the Examiner is talking about how many football tenets have become key cornerstones of hurling coaching. So he's firmly blaming blaming this on football coaches and what they've brought to hurling recently, because we can't all blame this on referees. Like, we can to a certain degree in terms of the recent changes over the last couple of weeks, for example, but hurling hasn't exactly been moving in a great direction over the last couple of years. Of course, it's absolutely blasphemous to suggest that such a thing might actually be the case, but like, in many ways,
What do you mean?
in many ways, like hurling has now just turned into a situation where are you strong enough to puck the ball a long distance? And like, I mean, Cork against Tip was a decent game on Saturday night, but like Jason Ford, when he brings it back to level scores after 75 minutes or something like that, he is standing inside his own 65 and he's still got about 20 yards to spare. Neil McManus, when he launches that one from inside Antrim's half against Clare last week, an amazing little turn, and then pucks the ball over from deep inside his own 65, again with another 20, 30 yards to spare. It's like, wow, good job, you can puck the ball 100 yards. Well done you. But that's what everybody can do now. Everybody can score from deep within their own half. That should be, just scoring from within your own half should be a rare, weird thing. Now it's becoming the norm in hurling. It is the norm. Every game you see an inside your own half score regularly.
Yeah, but so all of a sudden then defences are going to have to start taking account of the player inside their own 45 who is able to score from there, and I think that's going to bring.
What about the freeze?
Like the game is going through an evolution, right? I mean, when
you can't foul somebody in the opposition half.
For example, well then don't foul somebody inside the opposition half. That's actually a really good thing. If you can't now foul somebody without the fear of giving away a score, then that actually means that you're going to see a much cleaner, crisper, more silky,
cleaner or unphysical
hurling match. What?
Cleaner or non-physical? I would say it's moving towards the latter.
I don't think so, Owen. I think that you absolutely still see good physical challenges and good competition for the ball, because the referees aren't going to blow up for shoulders. I think Kevin Durant from downtown in Game 3 against the Cleveland Cavaliers, was it just before half time, or was it it was just before half time, close to the halfway line. You're not complaining about the fact that Kevin Durant and loads of people can score threes. You're like, wow, that's
threes
amazing.
Are different.
What an amazing bit of skill.
Threes are different. Threes are very different to scoring within your own. If Steph Curry scores from the halfway line, you're like, that is amazing. Like, the thing is, Steph Curry will not have an uncontested shot.
To different standards.
But he will not have an uncontested shot from within his own half. That's my problem. It's almost with the free taking. Well, the McManus example was actually a terrible example, because that's from play, and that was actually this really brilliant moment where he ditches his defender and leaves him eating dust, and then he scores from within his own half.
More and more of that. I think the point about the freeze is actually on the rule changes and just the lack of the advantage rule that's going to happen. I think that they can sort that out. But I actually think that hurling's going in a really good direction, where you can rack up these scores, and where if you're a team who has good shooters, you can position them anywhere from the half-back line forward and try and create a game plan around them. And I think that over the next couple of years, we're going to see, hopefully, some of those teams who have been coming from the lower divisions make that leap, because you can work on that skill and you can rack up 22, 24 points and then hope that your inside forwards, because the rules are going to get some freedom to score goals. Like, I don't think, but it's interesting that you think that, and I think there's a view out there that hurling's going in a kind of tragic direction.
I don't have many policies in sport, but one of them is it should be hard to score from your own half. But if you give away a free anywhere near the opposition 65, you're conceding. If your opposition free taker is worth his salt in intercounty hurling, you are conceding from that position, and I don't know, I think that just cheapens the whole thing. It cheapens the really amazing things we see every single week in intercounty hurling.
Why should you be allowed to foul with impunity, though? Why should halfbacks...
That's not what I'm suggesting at all. Sometimes fouls are accidental. Sometimes fouls are genuinely accidental. Sometimes there's a crap referee. Sometimes and they do not warrant a score opportunity being given. Fair enough if that happens in the opposition half, because that's the scoring zone. But all of a sudden, fouling anywhere in the hurling pitch is becoming a scoring opportunity for the opponent. And I'm not on board for that. There's a couple of things we want to get into good. There are some good things. We've got like a minute. So we've got all the negatives out of the way, which is good. Football is the winner, as you can see there in the green. I think we've covered this in fairness. The FA Cup final on Saturday night, just this magnificent television experience. And then at number 1 here in the good is the Contenders. We've had plenty of reaction on what these should be. We've got David saying David Clifford is in the green, small touch of a goat about him. We've got M. Martin saying all good and well, Ger, with Kerry, but how poor are Galway? From a Galway man, I wouldn't look too much into Kerry's performance, as Galway were shocking. So are we doing that? Are we reading a lot into Kerry's performance, or are we saying challenge game this morning?
No, we're not. We're saying Kerry are absolutely sensational. Will on YouTube says, do not let Sheahan play down this Kerry win. Last year, Galway were considered one of the potential Champo winners, and Kerry disemboweled them, Japanese style. Build the Kerry hype. The hype train is leaving the station today. Get on board. It's Kerry's All Ireland to lose.
Yeah, that's like, I mean, they've carved themselves out as a contender. I think it's fair to say after the weekend. Like, no question about it. Nobody's going to try and play that down.
The greatest footballer of all time, in the peak of his powers.
No question about that. I'm being told to read the comments. Unfortunately, we don't have time for analysis on that right now. But we will get Anthony Moyles' take on that a little bit later on. James McCullough says Munster should be in the red for performance rankings. To lose at home to Connacht when they're the only team going full throttle for this pointless trophy is shocking. We've got Niall McCann saying get Carlo Ancelotti into the red. Yassine says Alisson for scoring that winner, obviously, and Schmeichel for 2 world-class saves. A good weekend to be a goalkeeper. As I say, David is suggesting David Clifford in the green. Oisin says get Kieran Donaghy in the green. Armagh forwards were very dangerous. It was a great performance from Armagh in patches yesterday. And Thomas Kane says Donegal should be in the green, beating Tyrone away in a high-scoring game. So we should also give a mention to Rashida Adeleke, who broke Phil Healy's 200-metre Irish record on Saturday night. She ran 22.96 in Texas, where she's in college. She's now on the brink of qualifying for the Olympics, and also the Irish rowers doing Irish rowing things. Olympic record being broken as 6 boats qualify for Tokyo. 6 boats. For the sake of Irish rowing everywhere, we really hope that the Tokyo Olympics goes ahead. Later this morning on OTB AM, we're going to pick a winner for Monday's Gillette starter pack. You still have time to send us in your suggestions. You can tweet us at Off The Ball. You can comment on our Instagram story or WhatsApp us at 0879 180 180. That is it for the performance rankings.
OTB AM's performance rankings with Gillette.
It is 8:02 on this Monday morning. Packed show still to come here on OTB AM. We've got hurling with Cyril Farrell. We've got rugby with Alan Quinlan. We will be talking Gaelic football with Anthony Moyles after 9. We are back after these, though, talking the Premier League with Nathan Murphy.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
Alisson scored! Unbelievable! The goalkeeper has scored!
Have you subscribed to the OTB Football podcast? If not, here's some of what you've missed over the last week.
Would he be better at Manchester United than Solskjaer?
Well, I'm only giving you my opinion. I believe so, yes.
And he picked the ball up and threw it. Now, I didn't see the first one. David Kemp was my assistant. Came over to me and just said, Tone, have you seen how Rory throws this ball?
Subscribe now to the OTB Football podcast stream wherever you get your podcasts and download the OTB Sports app.
Invisible Threads, a Go Loud original.
As we celebrate the 6th anniversary of marriage equality, Invisible Threads meets older members of the LGBTQ community who reflect on their journeys and tell their stories. From shame and isolation to conversion therapy, from living with fear to coming out as an older person. Join me, James O'Hagan, for this powerful 8-part series, winner of the first Go Loud Podship.
Subscribe to this podcast for free on the Go Loud app.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
Alexander Arnold whips it in. Alisson scores! Unbelievable! The goalkeeper has scored in the 94th minute. You've never seen anything like it. Alisson for Liverpool to keep alive their top 4 hopes, and nobody can quite believe what they have seen. West Brom 1, Liverpool 2. You're not mishearing me. The goalkeeper, Alisson, heads into the back of the net. Wow, a goal from the gods by Alisson.
Nathan Murphy, how is the voice this morning?
Hanging in there, just about hanging in there. I may have lost the run of myself there.
You're well within your rights to lose one of yourself there. You literally say in commentary you haven't seen anything like this. It was right up there as one of the most extraordinary things we've ever seen in the Premier League.
In any sport, Tiger Woods 2005 and the 16th at Augusta, it's the same stuff. Now they've got to qualify for the Champions League, obviously.
I think that's the one caveat you would put on this. That goal will gain in folklore if Liverpool go on and win their last 2 games and finish inside the top 4 because of what it will mean to the club. And if they can go on a run in the Champions League, people will constantly go back. If they don't beat Burnley or Crystal Palace and they miss out, it'll be one of those moments I think that Liverpool fans will probably be mocked for in years to come as to how they celebrated it at the time. But I think it was one of those great goals because it was so unexpected. There's times in matches late in games where you're expecting a team to grab a goal, where they're laying siege on the opposition and you just feel one's coming. That wasn't the case yesterday. Liverpool were done. They had thrown everything at West Brom in the first 75, 80 minutes and it felt like they'd nothing left in the tank in the last 5-10 minutes into injury time. It was past 94. You're just looking at Mike Dean, the referee, to blow the whistle. And you're writing off Liverpool's Champions League hopes. You're looking at their season in a totally different way as one of real failure. And then out of nothing for the goalkeeper, first time in Liverpool's history, a goalkeeper has scored for the club. And to do it at a moment of such importance, I know there've been goals from goalkeepers in the Premier League before, 6 of them, but none of them have been like that. And in some ways, the stats probably show the folly of sending your goalkeeper up because I think it was the first time a goalkeeper ever scored a header in the Premier League. But what a header it was as well. And I think what made it also was instantly you could tell what it meant to Alisson. Obviously, there's no fans in the stadium, so he's not running down to find the away supporters. But the way that he reacted was everything that has happened to him over the past 3 months with the passing of his father just came straight away. And also the delight that all his teammates clearly had, not just for the goal, but for him personally. So, yeah, it was a very special moment and one that we probably won't see again, that sort of drama.
You said in commentary it was a goal from the gods, which was kind of this haunting thing because Alisson will go on to say basically the exact same thing in his post-match interview. Was that a reference to Alisson's own year, or was it just kind of like spur of the moment stuff?
I presume it's spur of the moment stuff. I was off my seat at that stage, and that's the brilliant thing about a goal like that. You suddenly find yourself and you're jumping around the commentary booth, and Vinny Perth was next door and he had smashed his knee off the commentary booth, and part of you wishes that you could be there, and a moment like that if you were in the stadium would be a very different thing. But I think it's the only reaction. It was just such a unexpected moment, and as I say, I think you could tell instantly what it meant to Alisson, for him personally, even more than what it meant for Liverpool and keeping them in that race for the top 4. And it's been such a strange season in a way. It's been one of the more dull Premier League seasons, particularly the last few months where we knew Manchester City were going to win the title, where we knew relegation was done and dusted. If this was all that was left, and if Liverpool hadn't scored that goal, the top 4 race was done as well. We were heading into the final week of the season with really nothing at stake. So for that reason as well, it is a big, big moment in the season. And it's just a shame, really, it wasn't 2-3 days later where you would have had 8,000 in the stadium at least, and heading to Anfield next Sunday for Liverpool against Crystal Palace. But yeah, I think that's one that will stick with people for a long, long time. In 10 years, people will still be looking back on that goal.
The top 4 race is where it's at. This is the situation that often materialises late in the season, where you've got multiple teams going for the same thing and you get a proper race for it. What's your sense on how this is going to go? Surely Saturday afternoon should provide as much hope for Liverpool fans as anything else.
I think it does, because you're looking at Saturday and you can read whatever way you want. Do Leicester take the momentum of the cup final and go beat Chelsea, which would guarantee Leicester top 4? I mean, Chelsea are really on the back seat heading into the final day. Or have Leicester celebrated and Chelsea come out with a little bit of fight tomorrow and they turn it around completely? Whatever happens, it's going to go to the final day of the season. The problem for Liverpool is you couldn't trust Liverpool to go and win these final 2 games. Constantly throughout the last 4 or 5 months as they've collapsed, there have been moments where there have been sparks and you think this is them coming back to not where they were last season, but a team that can finish top 4. They went and beat Manchester United, ripped Manchester United apart at times on Thursday night, and you think 3 games, okay, potential banana skins, but the momentum that they have now and they're back scoring goals, surely they kick on from here. And yesterday again, wasteful in front of goal, a mess at the back at times, and They go to Burnley on Wednesday. Burnley have already beaten them at Anfield this season. And then Crystal Palace on the final day of the season with Roy Hodgson, possibly his final game as a manager. See, they beat Palace 7-0 at Selhurst Park at Christmas. You'd expect there to be a reaction. Liverpool should win these 2 games, but there's been little over the last 3 or 4 months to suggest that they will do it easily. And I think if you're a Liverpool supporter, this is going to be an incredibly nervous week. But things may work out in their favour if Chelsea have this late season collapse.
What is the truth about where Liverpool are at? Because Thursday looked as if Liverpool were getting ready to launch a title challenge again next year with maybe some of the performances that they had and some of the players that have yet to come back. And then yesterday, 26 shots they had against West Brom, and obviously needing their goalkeeper to score in the last minute. That's very indicative of the thing that has held them back over the last 3 or 4 months.
Yeah, yesterday summed up the problems that they have. Obviously, a huge gap in the heart of the defence when they're without 4 centre-backs at this stage. And Nat Phillips has had a good run, but he's not at a top Premier League level. And Reece Williams is a young kid who at times has looked completely out of depth, and the 2 of them together combined hasn't been pretty for Liverpool. So that's going to be something that continues for the next 2 games. Chris Wood is going to be licking his lips for Burnley ahead of that match on Wednesday. Christian Benteke has suddenly found a little bit of form, has a good record against Liverpool. So Liverpool are going to concede over the next couple of games. And then at the other end, maybe that's the bigger question. Are those players a little bit fatigued, so they're missing simple opportunities that they would otherwise put away? Like, you think back to Mane's chance when Liverpool are trying to equalise. He's 10 yards out and somehow he side foots it wide. Firmino, when he hits the post where he simply has to just side foot it into the back of the net. And in the second half, again, the opportunity for Salah when he's clear through. These are big opportunities that Liverpool were taking constantly last season. So is that because they're out of form, because they're fatigued and a summer off means they come back in August completely rejuvenated? Or have they just been there that little bit too long? Do they need a spark, something to freshen them up? Like Mane and Salah, like, their body language is shocking. Like, there is no warmth there whatsoever. Yesterday, Mane has the assist for Salah. Like, there's a bit of a celebration. There was the reverse last week, but at no stage do you see a real apology if one of them plays a bad ball. They can barely look at each other at times, I feel. So how long can they leave that to continue? And if one is to go, Salah's the one who's obviously far more valuable, but Salah's also the one who's top scorer in the Premier League. And Liverpool players constantly go on about Mane's work rate and Firmino's on-scene work. Salah is the genius of that front three. Salah is the once-in-a-generation type player that you can't replace. It's almost impossible unless they're going to go and spend the 100 million on somebody that you're going to replace Mo Salah. You can get somebody in who could do a job like Sadio Mane. And Firmino hasn't been at it for 2 seasons at this stage. Like, they've changed it for the last, really since after half an hour against United. They've gone with more of a 4-3-1-2. So Firmino playing as a 10 and Mane and Salah up front together rather than out in the wings. And it's meant that Salah's got on the ball an awful lot more. The more Salah gets on the ball, the better Liverpool are, because technically he is their best player, maybe with the exception of Thiago in the middle of midfield. But from the attacking three, he's the one that creates everything. And like, if Mane's work rate isn't what it was, he's always been a funny finisher. He's never been the most technically gifted finisher. Everything seems to sort of bobble in off. Hasn't stopped him scoring a load of goals. But I think they have big decisions to make. And that's why the next week is huge, because you'd imagine the conversations you're in around who you're going to sign are completely different if you're not inside the top 4.
Champions League. Yeah, so call it. What's going to happen?
It's hard to believe that Liverpool won't reach the top 4 after that moment yesterday. I wouldn't be surprised if Leicester went to beat Chelsea tomorrow night, and if Liverpool ended up drawing with Burnley and then somehow, I don't know, it goes to the final day and there's a bit more magic and drama. I think it'll be Leicester and Liverpool will be the top 4. But to be quite honest, I wouldn't be surprised with anything that happens from all 3 clubs over the next few days. I would love to see Leicester finish in the top 4 after what happened on Saturday in particular, and you see what sort of a club they are. I'd love them to do it so they can keep the best players. I'd love them to keep Yuri Tielemans and Ndidi in the middle of midfield, and to keep Fofana and Soyuncu at the back, and bring back James Justin. I think that could be a really exciting team over the next few years. And we'll be looking at Thomas Tuchel and Chelsea in a completely different way if next week goes badly wrong for them.
Well, okay, just very quickly, because we're nearly out of time, but in the instance where Leicester finished 3rd and Liverpool finished 4th, then all of a sudden every Liverpool fan in the world is cheering on Man City, because I don't know if I'm right here, but if Chelsea win,
no, 5 teams go through. No, 5 teams. If Chelsea win and they finish inside the top 4, there won't be a 5th spot. But if Chelsea finish 5th and they win the Champions League, there will be 5.
Man United win the Europa League?
It makes no difference. So the only way there can be a 5th or 6th team is if it is the winning team in the Champions League or Europa League final and they finish outside the top 4.
Okay,
but what happens, there's no way Liverpool or Leicester can qualify for the Champions League unless they finish inside the top 4.
It's on, Nathan.
There's no way they can't not qualify if they finish in the top 4.
Yeah. If they finish in the top 4, they're going to qualify for the Champions League. No question about that. And it's looking like it's on. I mean, it's what a week. Like even like we were talking about this earlier, Nathan. Like what the sort of image that we now have of Thomas Tuchel, it's just shifted just a little bit, or at least of that Chelsea squad and what they might be able to do next season.
That's been this season, though, hasn't it? There's been so many matches. Every game is on TV. You sort of decide and make a big decision on what you feel about a club. Like, look at Manchester United. Week on week, it changes from progress to actually they're as far away from ever. I think next season it might be different because I presume we're going to go back to not having every single match on television, and maybe that's a good thing. And we can sort of pause for breath at some stage and not make wild predictions of what's going to happen.
We're still going to do that. We're still going to make wild predictions of what is going to happen throughout the season. Nathan Murphy, great stuff. Congratulations on a piece of art yesterday.
Thanks, Eoin.
It is 16 minutes past 8 on this Monday morning. We're talking Gaelic football with Anthony Moyles after 9. Alan Quinlan and Cyril Farrell are still to come later this hour. We are sticking with football now, though, because here is Vinny Perth, who joined Nathan for live OTB commentary of that dramatic win against West Brom for Liverpool.
Well, Vinny, we've seen some things in football, but the Liverpool goalkeeper scoring in the final minute of injury time to keep alive their Champions League hopes. God bless Alisson.
Yeah, what an amazing moment. And I just hope it means so much come the end of the season. And now Liverpool do end up in the Champions League because that was one of the great moments in Premier League football history, I think, potentially. Albeit, ironically, it's a scrap for 4th place. But it was just a brilliant moment, and especially with what's gone on this year. Alisson has lost his father, very spiritual guy. He speaks about Brazil and what's happened in that country. And for him to come up and make such a big moment. And it wasn't just that, there was also quality to the header. His technique was brilliant. What an amazing moment. And when you see Jurgen Klopp shocked at the end of it and didn't overreact because I think he was taken back, that tells you everything. Just an amazing finish to a game of football, and it makes you realise why you love the game, because when moments like that come, and they don't come that often, it just takes your breath away.
And so unexpected. And I'm sure there are supporters of other clubs who will have moments of this season that they will remember for a long time. But it's been such a strange season because of the lack of fans, because the title and relegation has been done so early. That moment, as you say, it feels as though in 10, 20 years' time is one that people are still going to be talking about.
Yeah, it was like what the FA Cup final gave us yesterday. It gave us an insight into what football was like before we lost all the fans. It was brilliant. It was great spectacle, all of that stuff. But what happened there happened without fans, and it was still in a magic moment. And I even myself got a huge energy boost out of it. It was a massive moment. Yes, I grew up a Liverpool fan, but I've become neutralised in that sense in terms of football. But that was an amazing moment in football, and there's so much at stake as well for it to happen. And I just think it's just a brilliant moment in football and in life. I think so many people get such a huge boost out of what happened in what's been a difficult year. What a magic moment.
We played Alisson's interview afterwards as well, and it was hard not to be emotional watching how emotional he was. And it was a reminder as well that footballers are human, that Alisson's father died in the last couple of months back in Brazil in terribly tragic circumstances. He wasn't able to go home for the funeral. That they are here entertaining us, but actually are going through the same things that so many people have gone through over the last 15 months.
Yeah, the interview really touched a nerve with me, because we live in a world now where everything is instant and people comment on each other and comment on if Alisson had made a mistake, he gets criticised and he paid the big dollars for all of that stuff. But these are real people. Like, to lose your father and as I said, someone so spiritual, to see I'm sure friends and family back in Brazil were affected by COVID, not being able to fly home and see your family, all of that stuff. And you see, he mentioned he's kept himself out of the press, and you get people who would have been critical of that at times. I want to do an interview with Alisson, why isn't he available, etc., etc. Or he probably walked past some press people. So you've seen a real insight into someone's life and what football means to them. So it's, as I said, it's a special moment for him. He just comes across as a great guy as well. And you think it probably couldn't happen to a nicer fella, to be fair to him. Just a great person, and he comes across a great person. We don't obviously know him, but I mean, a special moment for him and his life. And you could see the tears in his eyes, and he looked up to heaven to his father, and he said God had put his hand on his head and helped him do that. And that is his beliefs, and fair play to him. He deserved that moment today. It's very special.
It's hard not to look back on the game and go with scoreboard journalism and say Liverpool now kick on and qualify for the Champions League, because for the previous 5 minutes we were saying this game and result at 1-1 would sum up Liverpool's season, where sloppy at the back, obviously missing a lot of defenders, but just all over the place at times defensively, and so careless in front of goals. For 89, that was Liverpool being Liverpool that we've seen all season.
Yeah, there's a train of thought, and I have it. I think Klopp can get Liverpool back to their very best next season, but they're going to have to inject something into that, whether that's new players or different things. And I do think that, but at the same time, there was flaws in that performance. He said about the two centre-halves were very vulnerable to everything, balls up, all etc. But you look at Firmino's chance early on, and it's like almost like a training exercise where he's trying to bend it into the corner as opposed to just putting them chances away, and they haven't taken their chances, and as a result they've put themselves under pressure to defend, and they're obviously not good enough at the moment to defend. And then a couple of times I'm reluctant to be critical of Klopp, but I felt he got the changes wrong. Shaqiri is not a Liverpool player in my eyes, and when he came on it took away from what you were doing well at, and he stopped creating chances when he came on, ironically, and that was for me a tactical error at the time.
Is that a flaw in Klopp? Because that seems to happen on a regular basis. He loves to make changes in midfield, and at times you've seen Wijnaldum come off and Curtis Jones come on for the last 20 minutes, and as you say, all the momentum is just lost.
Yeah, I think it's hard to say it's a flaw in his. At times I can understand Curtis Jones coming on because does a goal threaten him, and you would think there isn't Shaqiri. But what happened was they changed the way they were playing. They went from their 4-3-3 to basically 4-2-4 with Shaqiri up front. But the biggest threat, and for 70 minutes, Trent Alexander was world class. He was Liverpool's biggest threat. He was the one going to cause something. What was happening on the opposite side with Curtis Jones wasn't creating enough. So the natural replacement for me was Wijnaldum. He tried to get in behind a couple of times, etc. But once he brought Shaqiri on, then there was no space for Trent Alexander to cause problems, and it just became dull. Didn't look like you were going to create a lot. Albeit then when Wijnaldum came on, that was a good change. And he should have scored as well with a side foot finish from a lovely layoff from Salah. So, look, it's hard to be critical. Jurgen Klopp, he's done an amazing job at Liverpool. I just think tactically this year, there's been mistakes, and they were potentially found out today.
Why are they missing so many chances?
Listen, in football, you talk about big moments change everything. A lot of people don't remember the great moment against Everton where the ball hits the crossbar and in the 94th minute and Origi heads it in from a yard. They just think Liverpool won the league last year and they dominate and beat teams. Football has changes on big moments over the years. There's so many little moments. And I just think for Firmino up front hasn't been good enough, and Mane doesn't look happy in the club. And the two of them Salah has carried them for goals. He may have not played well, but he's 22 goals. He looks like he probably, I think, with the teams they have to play over what Spurs have to play, he probably end up top scorer in the league this year. He's carried them with goals. And I don't think, in fairness, both fullbacks have been offered a little bit there, generally create chances, albeit Trent has been brilliant since he was left out of Liverpool. They create chances for them. So I think it's a whole combination of things. And then as a team, you're always wondered, are your team going to concede? And with the loss of the two centre-halves, they've just looked vulnerable in behind. So there's just a lack of confidence running right through the middle of the team.
Sam Allardyce will have plenty of reason to be peeved with the refereeing decision twice. The way the camera was going, we didn't see initially what had happened for Liverpool's first goal, and we were confused as to why it was a free kick that they took quickly that seemed fine, but then actually it was a drop ball that they just allowed Liverpool to take, and it ends up in a goal. And then the second one is given as offside for a player being in front of the goalkeeper. Both of those wrong decisions?
Yeah, I think the free kick for Liverpool, which allowed Fabinho take it quick to Firmino, and then Liverpool gone, was wrong decision. Fabinho ran into the back of the referee, and he seemed to blow the whistle. And
it's a hot ball.
It's a hot ball, and it's just mad stuff, and it just doesn't make sense unless we've missed something. I don't think we have. And then the header for the goal is just, there's nothing wrong with it. He's about 4 yards, maybe 3 yards in front of Alisson. Yes, he's blocking his view, but he's not interfering in that sense. And it's people in Stockley Park making football decisions who've never played football before. That's not interfering with the goalkeeper.
Is it not? Because if he's standing right in front of him, if that's not, could you not put a player in front of the goalkeeper all the time?
Yeah, but I would agree with that if he was a half a yard in front of him, a yard. He's 3-4 yards in front of him. And where else is he meant to be? He's entitled to be in that area. And to be fair, the header is going towards the corner. It's not going straight at him, where it went straight over that player's head. So there's enough space, I feel, between the attacker and the header for Alisson to see the ball. So I think it's a massive mistake, and I think Allardyce will not be happy with the two key decisions. But in football, you've got to take your luck. Big moments and things swung, and we said it in commentary at the time. This is now Liverpool have got away with one. Go and capitalise on it. Didn't think they would, but they certainly did.
In terms of where Liverpool go next season, we'll be able to have a conversation far better in a week's time.
Yeah.
If they're in the Champions League, they're probably in a position they can sign who they want. If they miss out, maybe they have to rethink things. How they get through the next week, a lot is going to depend on the defence of Nat Phillips and of Reece Williams, who were all over the shop today. I know Klopp has been talking up Phillips in particular over the last few weeks. This is going to be helter-skelter stuff, you feel? Yeah,
I thought Phillips has been excellent for them, and I thought it was a mistake to leave him out of the team. And for what he lost Fabinho in midfield, he should have left Phillips into the team. I think that was a mistake. But the combination of him and Williams hasn't worked today. But to be fair, they played against Manchester United on Thursday and were very good. And that's what you get with young players. You get inconsistency. They could be the best two players on the pitch against Burnley, but they'll have their work cut out, that's for sure, with Burnley's front two. So it is a concern. It is something you'll have to look at. But I don't think he can afford to put Fabinho back in there. Maybe if Kabak gets available, him and Phillips seem to have formed a good partnership. But there will be concern. Liverpool aren't over the line after today's result, and ultimately that's what the concern is. That big moment might be lost because they failed to finish the job in the next two games. Big concern for Klopp in terms of centre half.
It feels almost impossible to predict what's going to happen over the next 7 days. Chelsea-Leicester is the crucial game, and depending on what happens there, we could be going into the final day where Leicester-Spurs is absolutely massive, or if Leicester were to win on Tuesday, they're guaranteed of a top four, and suddenly Chelsea could find themselves right on the back foot.
Yeah, I think it's a strange one. I think if Liverpool, thinking about it, if Liverpool would probably prefer Leicester to beat Chelsea, because that means then
it's totally in their own hands.
It's totally in their own hands as opposed to relying on goal difference. So they probably prefer that result. But Tuchel has his job in his hands. He's Champions League final to prepare for, and it hasn't been good from them for the last few games. So they'll be right at it, and they'll really need to get that result to go their way. So really interesting week ahead. All Liverpool can do is now prepare for Burnley, which is a massively difficult game. Again, you've seen it with West Brom today. There's no pressure on them. They were not gung-ho, but they weren't afraid to throw bodies forward on that counter-attack. And Burnley will be, Dyche will enjoy. They had a little altercation in the tunnel earlier on in the season. So Dyche will look forward to upset Klopp. That's what you do, a manager at that level. You always feel of something to prove against this guy.
Go on, put your head on the line then. Who's going to finish third and fourth?
I think after today's moment, I'd be shocked if Liverpool now don't end up in fourth or third at least. And it's so difficult to call that Leicester game. Do Leicester recover after the FA Cup final and get the house in order? They've got two difficult games, Chelsea and Spurs. So difficult to predict, but I would say Leicester and Liverpool.
Great stuff, Vinny.
Cheers, thank you.
OTB AM.
Yeah, Vinny, Perth in conversation with Nathan Murphy after that incredible win for Liverpool in the Premier League yesterday. All of those pieces available on the OTB Sports app right now. It is 29 minutes past 8 on this Monday morning. We are turning our attention to the Allianz Leagues, and we're starting with hurling this morning. Delighted to welcome Cyril Farrell back to the show. Good morning to you, Cyril.
Morning, how are things?
Not too bad at all. So there's been a lot of reaction to the first couple of weekends of hurling that we've seen. A lot of it has been negative. What's been your take on the fare of hurling that we've seen over the first 2 weeks of this year's league?
Well, I suppose, again, often at the start of the league, the referees are very strict on rules. And I suppose all the frees being given, like now you have to have a really good free taker that will get 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 11 or that, because the free counts are going up. But like yesterday in PSA, it was interesting. Like, they always set up not to stop Limerick in the sense to play their own game, no sweepers, so it's shoved up on the limit puck out, and like didn't want to get bullied. That was the big thing that kind of came out of that game for me and watching it close. Like they were making sure, like, the physicality of Limerick is very, very strong, but this time Galway met them straight up, and the free count went Galway's way, which was kind of, unusual for a change, but definitely the free count for Galway was way higher than, it was higher compared to Limerick. I think it's about with a 22-14 in the count, like, and when you're nailing the frees, like, it gives you a great chance of winning.
That seems to be the key metric in all of these games so far. If you're winning more frees than your opponent, you've got a good chance of winning a game.
Yeah, well, you see, like, Limerick's style of play, like, is very physical. They're a very, very good team, a very physical team. But, like, for once, like, a team didn't go out to contain them. Galway kind of faced them straight up. Whereas if you watched, say, the Tip Cork game on Saturday evening, Tip conceded all the puck outs more or less to Cork. They worked the short game, and Tip were trying to break them down. If they broke them down and got a free, they scored. But other than that, they were kind of dependent on Cork's kind of short game to break down. Cork did some great hurling, and, that's the kind of new style, I suppose, really, that kind of short game, working through the lines and, having a pop pass and off the shoulder and get goals in the run. But, like, again, the free take, and even though Jason Ford is an immaculate free taker last night or Saturday night, wasn't up to his usual high standards, even though he nailed the one near the end. But it showed, like, the free taking is very, very, getting more important. And I suppose, like, the legislators have to have a look at it, because you don't want to just have a free, like, just have a free taker to win matches. You'd want to have more kind of flow in the game.
It's becoming too much, isn't it? Like, as you say there, it is the deciding factor in all of these. Like, what would you change or what would you do to ensure that it doesn't become too important, the free taking?
Well, I suppose you'd have to say, like, during the start of the league, the rules are being enforced very, very, very much. Like, you'll always find as it goes on in the championship, it kind of eases down a bit. Like, okay, the rule, like, about pulling down, but that's not where all the frees or where all the talk is coming from. It's kind of coming from, kind of, say, kind of touching the physicality. They're taking that physical element out of it so far anyway. Now, it might come back into it, and like, there's a big outcry about it. But, I suppose it was always there if you wanted to kind of follow the letter of the law. But, like, usually in hurling, it's kind of let flow. And now that it's been stopped, like, it's causing consternation. After saying that, I had some great games, like Wexford came back from the gate yesterday against Kerr again. When Kerr the man stopped, Wexford kind of good at the running game, walked the ball through the lines, and I think had about 2 goals in a minute or two, changed the whole complexion of the game. And their free taking wasn't good yesterday, which is like, and then to cap it all, Connor got a free out and a nearly impossible angle and scored it after all that, after missing frees, so it was unusual, really.
Can I just talk a little bit about this? Because I was reading Eamon Donoghue's piece in the Irish Times before the All-Ireland hurling final last year, and he was talking about the free count, that Limerick have been racking up big numbers of frees, but they tended to be quite far from goal. So I'm not saying that it was a tactic or anything, but that they felt safe giving away frees far from goal. I don't know, are we getting to the point where you don't want teams to be tactically fouling in the full back line? What you say is true, but most teams playing Limerick up to this didn't play with 6 forwards. They played usually with a sweeper to contain, to stop Limerick and kind of go back, kind of defend, to stop them from them working the ball through the lines. Yesterday, the big change was in the tactics that Galway played their own game. They didn't actually go out. They set up with 6 at the back, 2 midfield, 6 forwards, which is very unusual in the modern game, because usually they're kind of, playing very defensive and kind of walking through the lines. And they kind of changed. They had a long ball and the short ball, but they set up kind of to suit themselves and to kind of meet Limerick's physicality head on.
Now, the free count went Galway's way, another day it could go the other way. John Kiley after the match was very upset about it, but that can happen, I suppose, really. Like, but it's early in the championship. But I expect Limerick next Sunday to bounce back with a big display. They're missing a few top players, and they're still very good. They're only kind of getting, you know, they're like a giant just kind of ambling along so far. Their big thing is to retain the All-Ireland, and the game in Pearse Stadium will be forgotten about, which will probably teach them a lesson. And like he's finding out like that some of the young players they brought on are good hurlers, but they're not ready for the real fray yet. Like, they're only still very young, you know.
Galway the second best team in the country at the moment.
Yeah, like, look, when all is said and done, like, Galway ended very close last year, and okay, Limerick deserved to win, but like Cathal Mannion was gone off injured, and Joe Cannon, that's going to happen. They were going off injured. And these are two talismans for Galway. Like, Mannion is playing over his skin. Joe Cannon looks fantastic shape, like looks in great shape and got some great scores. He's a great hurler. These guys have been on any team. That's not saying that beats Limerick. Like, it promises to be a great summer, because like Cork are coming with their style of play, walking the fast puck out, going through the lines, like, you know. And Tip like seem to be kind of still relying on the older players, still very hard to beat, like, you know. And Waterford yesterday put out all the panel and nearly got caught for Westmeath at a great game. So like things are beginning to shape up. Wexford hard to beat. Clare will be very disappointed just because their performance was quite good, even though they were beaten. Now they have to win the next day out, but like you know, Wexford will be very happy to have 4 points out of 2 games. And I suppose the team so far of the league so far has to be Antrim. I know they'll beat yesterday by Kilkenny. It's a hard act to go down to Nolan Park and win there, but Antrim have been kind of refreshing, really, like, you know. And I'd say Matty Kinney over Dublin will be kind of watching close to Antrim in the league because they're playing them in the championship, and that's not a foregone game between Dublin and Antrim by any means.
No, absolutely not. They've really been the story of the first 2 weeks. Just to go back just one last time to Limerick against Galway, Cyril, I just wanted to ask you about John Kiley's comments after the game. He's obviously been one of the main voices disagreeing with some of the new rules that have been brought into hurling, but he was also talking about Galway, and he said that when a player has the ball and they run at you and throw themselves on the ground and they're roaring and shouting, that's embarrassing. That's not part of the game. He called it simulation. Some clear examples. A couple were very embarrassing. None of us want to see that brought in as part of our game. Was that what Galway were at yesterday, Cyril? Was it a load of simulation from them?
Well, he must have saw it that way. I didn't see it that way. You know, they won't clear showed it, but like, you know, Limerick are no soft twitches, like, you know, like they're a good, strong physical side and good hurlers, like, but so are Galway. And like after last year, the feeling in Galway would be that they were bullied in Croke Park, you know, that they felt they were bullied. For example, Joe Cannon got a good hard tackle, went down, I know it was a free given. No Galway lad even complained to the ref or tackled the Limerick lad. That was felt around the county, that these lads, you know, it's about time stood up. And I think yesterday they did stand up, like, and kind of face to face up. And that was always going to happen. Like this year after what happened to Galway last year, that was the feeling. Whether it was or not, that was the feeling in the county. And people were saying, look, it's about time we stood up to these guys, because they are big and strong. So you have to be force. Like, you can't just avoid them. So, you know, John Kiley, he's forewarned now, and since Galway have probably done Limerick a great favour, because like, we're kind of cruising. The last day against Tipperary out, like, it didn't seem that they minded to get beaten. And yet when Tip got in front about all the big ones, that they wanted to hold the record of not losing a game. And it will probably be a relief that, you know, that they kind of pick themselves up again, and they will. You know, there's no doubt about that. Like, I think it's a great warning to John Kiley that what can happen on a given day. But like, Galway are one of the few teams around that would have a lot of talent, and they have a lot of physical strength, the same as Limerick.
I'd say describing an opponent as diving in hurling is one of the terrible things you can say about an opponent. It kind of questions, I don't know, the integrity of your opponent and things like that.
Yeah, well, Galway wouldn't like that, and I'll tell you that, because these guys, like, they'd be very honest players, and they'd be good players. Like, you know, they've won all Irons and lost, and they've been around the block a lot. All the guys, young lads getting, you know, like, you know, there's a couple of young lads there coming on and fighting for the positions. That, you know, I don't know, maybe one occasion that I got tripped, but other than that, like, I was surprised really, because like, Limerick are a good physical team, like, and like, you have to, like, when you live by the sword, you have to die by the sword. It's only a league game, you know. So he's probably trying to get the message across that Limerick are being penalised too much for being physical. They do live on the edge, they hurl on the edge, and last year didn't count. Like, you know, these three are going against them. This time they are. So like, they will have to curtail their tackling. There's no doubt about that, because like, they're giving these frees away. Like Tip against them lived on frees and drew the match. They hardly got a score from play for a long time, Tip didn't, but yet they were quite content to put out the full forward line, let Limerick have the ball, and kind of contain and wait for a mistake and kind of punish a free. That's what Tip did against them. And but I think Limerick will learn, and they'll just kind of curtail the tackling a little bit. And in the championship, I think it's God help them Meath, because they're still a great team.
Yeah, absolutely. When it comes to Cork then, Cyril, they seem to be another county who've realised that adding a bit of grit to their game, especially in defence, is what's required for them to finally step up and contend for an All-Ireland. Is that what you've seen over the first couple of weeks, that this is a team that isn't going to die so easily?
Yeah, look, they're lovely hurlers. They always have been lovely hurlers, and they're very, very good hurlers. But now, again, it's the kind of the modern game. A lot of people won't like it. A lot of people, they say, good God Almighty. I had 3 phone calls yesterday when people said, is this the modern game from Saturday night? The kind of the short puck out, sweeping through the lines. Now, you see, Tip conceded the puck out, so it's easy for them to puck a chart, because they're going to win it and kind of work it through the lines and pop off the shoulder and kind of walk the ball into the net. Now, that's an art in itself, and they are very, very good hurlers. But, their defence has tightened up, but you'd expect nothing else with the rock and roll of Grady in there, that was their masterpiece. And they have very, very good players. Now, if you give Cork room to dance, they will dance. You know what I mean? But after saying all that, they got 2 very good goals against Tipperary and Sydney drew the match. So, there will be kind of questions about themselves again when they come up against kind of a team that won't let them have that with challenge on the puck out. You know what I mean? That will shove up on the puck out. So, in other words, you have to win your own ball, which to them now will be hard enough to do. But they are lovely hurlers. And Young Coleman centre back is playing over his skin. These guys up front are lovely. And Young Connery there, so I'm playing until the 1 year or 2 ago he came on. These guys are good hurlers. They have the hurling ability. Now, when they meet Limerick in the championship, they're going to have to be able to stand up to the physicality of Limerick as well, because Limerick have fellas that have to take tackles, cut through them, and use their strength legally. So it's going to be a great summer. It's hotting up already. And I suppose you'd have to say as well, the hurlers are lucky to get the second chance, whereas the poor footballers, well, if you have a poor day at the office or get caught with a late goal, you're gone for the year. It's tough on them,
Cyril, I wanted to ask you about the experience in the backroom team of Cork. It's kind of, I was comparing it to the supergroup, the Travelling Wilburys yesterday. They've got players and management from every generation going back to the early 80s involved with the team. Just how important is that going to be, do you think?
Well, you see, Cork are a very traditional and proud county, and they haven't been winning, and they're probably not used to not winning. So they put everything, they're leaving no stone unturned. They're not afraid to ask the young and the old out to help. And typical Cork, everyone gets behind the team, and if they get on a run, if they get on a run, they'll be very they have a great hurling ability and great tradition. Now the likes of say Donald O'Grady, who had Noel and the Rock and these guys and Jerk Putnam, they're real hurling men. Have learned the trade, playing the game with colleges, the whole lot. We call it the modern game. That's what they're trying to play now, because it kind of suits their hurlers. They're able to play kind of lovely flick hurling off the shoulder, and they are using the pace. Now where they're going to run into trouble is they have to fight for the puck out, and when they're hit with tackles hard, when these lovely passes are coming, in other words, to stop the run. That's what they're going to have. But if they get it run in the championship, they could come overnight. Now, we're saying that for a good while, because it's a good while since Cork won All-Ireland. But they are a very exciting team to look at, and they're but to me now, the first match against Limerick is going to be something else, because you're talking about a kind of a running, short off the shoulder team against a team more or less the same, like Limerick the same, but a lot more physical and have that experience of winning. And when you put out all the Limerick, when you get the whole team out together and the move well, they're still very hard to stop.
They're scoring goals this year. That's the kind of difference between previous seasons, where in that Tip game at the weekend, they might have lost that a couple of years ago or last year.
They are going for the juggler, because they have the pace. When the point is on, they're not taking. They're going that extra yard, drawing the man and walking kind of the hand pass off the shoulder. It's like a football thing, really. Lots of the hurling crowd, the older generation, they're wondering when are they going to hit the ball, even hit a long ball. It's all about kind of possession, but they are good at it, and they have the pace to exploit it. And what was very nice against Tip was even the subs of Brahan, the guys who kind of maybe get a bit tired up front, the subs of Brahan were very, very effective. So they are getting a room into their panel, and they're going to have about 20 players that they can use in the championship, which you need where the modern days go, and especially with all the running game that they have. But when they meet the championship, where they're going to get a hard tackle when they're making that run, that's when you really see what they're made of.
You mentioned that tactical point in Cork Tip, the surrendering of the opposition puck out. I think maybe in big football games, teams have reached a point where doing that maybe isn't wise. Do you think hurling is going to eventually develop that way, where surrendering the puck out just doesn't make sense?
Well, Tipperary have played 2 games now against Limerick and against Cork, and they've more or less surrendered the puck out and then, kind of broke it down out the field and pinned and we call them turnovers. And, like Galway, say last year, played a sweeper against Limerick, but it was very noticeable yesterday that they faced it straight up and every puck out was contested and under the high ball. Now, Limerick are good under the high ball. It was very noticeable when Galway puck out that were more or less go down on top of Joseph Cooney, wing forward. Now, he's a big unit and he was under pressure on the high ball, but ball, they didn't mind. Galway seemed they didn't mind not getting the high. They were getting ready for the break of the ball. They seemed to have that worked out. Like big unit again, something like Garrett Hegarty, big and strong and forceful. And that's the like kind of the outlet that they have on the long ball. Short ball is lovely, if the opposition give it to you. But like even against Kerr yesterday, we have a Quinlan playing and goals for Kerr and playing well. But like when the puck out goes wrong and the opposition gets the ball bang over the bar, it looks. That's when it breaks down. It looks terrible. So, but you have to live by it if you're going to run it like Cork are sticking to it, I'd say, and they're going to stick to it. So it'll be interesting to see how the game goes on. Like, and they have the players. Limerick are still ahead of the posse and the rest are chasing, but like Galway kind of showed how to beat Limerick and kind of at least give us a glimmer of hope, because for a while there they were unbeatable. It's very hard to stay unbeatable. I think in the long run it'll do John Kiley a lot of good actually to get beaten and just kind of maybe say start again, but they're still the champions.
Yeah, and then on the general thing, hopefully you're right as well about the free count diminishing as the weeks go by. Hopefully referees
I think it will. That's gone down through the history of the GA, like the start of the leagues. Like you'll see championship hurling where it'll be still kind of physical and thunderous stuff, which we kind of need in hurling. We don't need it to be like a tennis match, ping pong, free here, free there. Like we don't need that. We need the flow, and the sooner they get back to that, the better.
Yeah, well, fingers crossed it actually turns out that way. Just very briefly before we wrap, Cyril, are you concerned about Clare at all? Obviously, Antrim last weekend and that collapse yesterday with all the off the field sagas that occurred over the course of the winter. It's impossible to separate those two things. It's only the league, but it hasn't been a good start to the league.
No, it hasn't, but it's important that the lads over the team concentrate on the team. Like, they still have a good team. Like, now, yesterday, to be fair, Tony Kelly went off. You're missing Shane O'Connor, you're missing David Reedy, you're missing these kind of good lads, that would be on the team. Now, they still played very well, and for most of the game, they were well on top. But in that, like, you have to realise that the Wexford free taking was an off day. You know what I mean? They should never have been that far behind. But they were, and Clare were quite happy. And if you were listening to the counter group, they were kind of cruising. You know what I mean? Or seemed to be cruising the whole time. And the next thing they were hit with these goals. But like the modern day, like the likes of Simon Donoghue got a fantastic goal. He was playing cornerback yesterday, like number 4 in your back or number 2. That doesn't matter anymore. You have to be able to travel. And like Wexford are playing the kind of the short game, travelling with the ball, going forward and playing it across the pitch, working up together. And again, when it works, it looks lovely. When it breaks down, of course, they're all roared. Well, there's no one there to roar to really, but everyone is kind of upset at them. But like that's Davy's game, and he's not going to change. Like Kevin Foley will be back there. He mightn't like the word sweeper with Cod, whichever like an extra defender. He's protecting the full back line, and they'll attack and draw. They did a gesture, and like on song, they're a hard team to beat. Be interested to see themselves in Kilkenny win the Meath again, like, because again they're two very physical teams.
Cyril Farrell, great to have you with us this morning. Thanks a million.
Well, pleasure is mine.
Cheers, thank you. 8:47 on this Monday morning. Plenty of reaction across a number of sports this morning. Wayne Ryan has been in touch to ask us, how big is Clifford, lads? COVID break done him good. Letty Bai says, what do Limerick hurling and Munster have in common? Crying about refs when they lose. We'll put that one to Alan Quinlan in just a moment. James McCullough says, seeing his own, loves his scoring goalkeeper. Check out Mark Poom's 96th minute equaliser for Sunderland versus Derby County in 2003. I feel blessed I was there. Amazing header. I must check that one out. I haven't seen it. Paul says Mayo for Sam. It started. Mayo for Sam. What did they win by at the weekend? 11, 12, 13 points. They're the real winners at the weekend. They're the ones that have got off scot-free by not being in the green this morning in the performance rankings. Darren says up Kildare. Ger, are you like, is your lily white heart fluttering?
It's just, you don't want to get too carried away, but like, we're coming. A white storm is coming to sweep the filth off the streets, Owen.
Looking forward to it. Michael says, rule changes in Gaelic football are also so bad. The mark is the one I hate the most. O'Shea said it right last year. When you want to see forwards turn and burn the backs, not kick simple balls over the bar. I think Michael's onto something there. I think there were a couple of moments in the Roscommon Dublin game yesterday which were Not great. Now there will be. It was probably where it was at its most naked since I've seen the mark come in that game yesterday. And maybe this is because teams are working on it a little bit more. Maybe it was a coincidence.
No, it's not a coincidence. They've had time to live with it. They've had a season of practicing it. They've had data analysis done. Like I thought Gaelic football was evolving, like was responding to the negativity of the blanket defence really well. Like the best coaches had thought about what the best way to overcome that was. And the regulators decided, no, we need more high fielding because that's what Mick O'Connell did. And we all know that's the only time that Gaelic football was ever any good. And so that's what we're going back to. And now you're going to have lads chipping the ball into somebody on the edge of the 40. And they'll be like, well, that's not fair. You weren't supposed to do that. You're supposed to kick it over his head into a 50-50 competition. And like the good coaches are like, well, duh, we're not doing that because that's idiotic.
McStay made that point as well last night, saying that the high fielding has not been increased whatsoever. It's just people catching the ball in their chest, popping out on left or right wing, and that's it. There was this interesting moment, though, yesterday where Davy Byrne catches a mark and he's just outside the Dublin scoring zone. Like we all know the scoring zone for Dublin, and he takes his mark and he puts it wide. Like there is a way of opening up players like Davy Byrne or Michael Fitzsimons or those. There's only a limited few Dublin players who you might feel comfortable with the ball in their hands, but you'll be more comfortable with the ball in their hands than, say, Dean Rocks or Conor O'Callaghan's or Kieran Kilkenny's. That I wonder if Dublin get to this point, do you actually start to double mark their forwards and let them pop the ball out to Davy Byrne, who's 30, 40 yards out. Let him have his mark. And in a full Croke Park, when crowds come back, there'll be added pressure on those kicks. And maybe that's your response to what Dublin are doing at the moment. But they seem to have absolutely nailed the mark. And this is the thing, the best coaching teams are going to get the most out of any rule tweak. And Dublin didn't work on it under Jim Gavin, famously. He said that they hadn't worked on it. It was only his last season when he came in fairness. But now they've had time, and now it looks like that they found other avenues into killing a team.
It was only in for the league. Remember, it wasn't so.
That's it.
Different
Sorry,
rules
yes.
And that's why they didn't work on it. Like, you know, he was working entirely with his eye on the championship prize, which you would do when there's a 5 in a row on the line. So, like, look, I mean, if you want high fielding from kickouts, then reward the mark from kickouts. But like the whole, I don't know, it's very close to Aussie rules. Really, really very close to Aussie rules.
And not in a good way. There are plenty of positives from Aussie rules that you could take, but this is not one of them. Eoin has been in touch to say there is an art to hooking, blocking and tackling. Kylie needs to relax a bit. If the frees were going the other way, would he have made the same statement? I doubt it.
I brought up Eamon Donoghue's piece. It was a preview for the All-Ireland final, and he said that the free count went Galway's favour quite significantly in the Galway-Limerick game as well. The idea is that Limerick are happy to foul systemically because they do it in certain areas of the pitch to stop the opposition building up any kind of flow or building their attacking platform. And if they're going to be beaten by players who can now score from very deep, well then they're going to have to change. And that's my point, Eoin, about the future of the sport not being as bankrupt as some people out there think, i.e. you.
I'm not talking about it being morally bankrupt. I just think that it's got to a point where it's sucking the beauty and spontaneity out of its game. Like, I mean, every hurling man and woman will know that the beauty of hurling is in its spontaneity and its magic and its creativity, and that is being taken away somewhat because the free taker is now king, and nobody can get within a few metres of the free taker when it comes to their importance on the scoreline in every single game. And I just think it's a little bit too important. That is my point. And there are only a certain amount of frees that you can watch and be like, wow, you can puck the ball a hell of a long way. Fair play to you, and you can put it between the black spot. In fairness, it is an amazing skill, but everybody can do it at this point, is my take on that. Right, at 8:52 on this Monday morning, it is time to turn our attention to the rugby. Alan Quinlan is with us as ever. How are you, Alan?
Good on knowing yourself.
Yeah, not too bad. Like, I think when we looked at this Rainbow Cup at the start, after there was a little bit of a falling away in terms of the proposed format, and then after the first couple of weeks we thought, well, this is going to be a waste of everybody's time. All of a sudden on Friday you had Connacht lads and Munster lads fighting each other, and all of a sudden this thing feels quite important.
Yeah, it does. I think when we often ask about the bite and the derbies, are they gone? And we've seen evidence that the last few years that they've been all nice, timid affairs. And but Friday night, I think there was a fair bite to that game between Connacht and Munster. not surprisingly, because obviously there's a number of guys who played with Munster who'd be disappointed that maybe they were let go. Also, Connacht, after getting bullied the week before, I expected a reaction, an aggressive physical reaction, and a desperation, because Munster are a big scalp for them. And to be fair, they were brilliant. I was really impressed with the effort level, the commitment, the desire, all that kind of stuff, and the fight, not to be bullied themselves. So I like Andy Friend. I think he's a brilliant coach. I love his attitude to the way the game should be played, and he's done a great job in difficult circumstances with Connacht since he's taken over, and produced some brilliant performances. Consistency has probably been the key, and maybe staying at that emotional high pitch all the time. But they brought an emotion on Friday night which unsettled Munster. Surprisingly, I thought Munster they didn't get control. At no stage did they look like they were in control for a long period. I felt that, look, they were going to get themselves back into the game after conceding, particularly the try off the kickoff for Sammy Arnold. Bad mistake. And then the Marmion one was another bad mistake by Munster. But Connacht exploited that, and they took their 2 chances. And those 14 points were significant in the end. Obviously, Connacht won by 4 points, and Munster had 2 tries chalked off themselves. One of them correctly. The second one, I don't think so. I think the Peter O'Mahony one was pretty clear. Jack O'Donoghue takes out Pat Leahy. That should have been ruled out. The Andrew Conway crossfield kick, I didn't think that was clear and obvious, as the TMO Joy Neville said. I thought Caelan Blade's hand he was trying to poach the ball, and that he pulled the ball forward, but it wasn't clear and obvious. But look, aside from that, I think Munster were poor on the night, and gave themselves a bit of a mountain to climb now, given that they were, potentially, and they were in control of their destiny, win the 5 games, and they probably would have been playing a final.
I know rugby prides itself on the whole sir and deference to the referee and stuff, and it's mostly it's very good. As sports fans, we don't want to change this in any way. But CJ Stander was having none of that in the post-match. He's like, look, I'm out of here. That referee, well, he stank, essentially. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, lest all the Munster fans get angry, but it was interesting to see somebody openly criticise the refereeing in the aftermath of the game.
Yeah, look, I think I don't want to insult Connacht people, because I'll have a barrage of abuse online if I start. But listen, he was shocking. The referee was absolutely shocking. More shocking for Munster, but shocking enough for Connacht at times as well. I think his whole attitude, decision making, positioning, some of the decisions were terrible. And Munster, rightly so, should feel aggrieved. I watched the game back twice, and I would implore the people who are going to say it's sour grapes or giving out about me saying this, go back and look at the game, take off look at it from an impartial point of view, and some of the decisions were really baffling. Munster's discipline was really poor at times. Their accuracy, when they got into good positions, they lost lineouts, they turned the ball over, they knocked the ball on. So they've no one to blame for themselves there, but there was a couple of real kind of crucial decisions. And look, anybody who knows CJ Stander, he's a very honest, open guy, and for him to come out with that, and I've been in that situation myself before, where you go off a field and you're absolutely fuming. It is a tough job. There's lots of interpretations there, but the penalty count was 19-9 and against Munster. They were the team who had most of the possession, particularly for most of the second half. And, they're the ones that got penalised the most. But this will be separated, of course, now. People will take this as a headline. I still think Connacht, for their endeavour, their work rate, their passion, deserved to get what they got at the end, a win, because they just made it so difficult for Munster. And of course, you always have situations where 1 or 2 decisions go your way, you can win a game. Look, if the knock-on wasn't given, Munster win the game, and Connacht are heartbroken. But Munster had previous with Dan Jones at the start of the year over in Scarlets as well. I think he pinged them off the park. And I genuinely, clear as day, remember watching that game on TV going, this is shocking. This this guy actually doesn't like Munster. The decisions he's making, they're baffling. The penalising at the breakdown.
Alan, if Munster have previous with a referee like that, then don't they come forewarned? And the second time around,
yeah, there's some things you just can't do anything about. You know, some things you can't do anything about. You know, if he's penalising one side for hindmost foot and he's not penalising the other side, and it's blatantly obvious that he's getting decisions wrong, particularly when Munster are on the attack. I think, what can you do about that? Of course, there were situations where the discipline needed to be better, but there was crucial decisions went against him, and that's why CJ Sanders says it. So, you know what I mean? We're sick of bland interviews after matches. We're sick of guys saying the right thing, or the opposition are great and they're a great team. Nobody speaks the truth. Somewhere in the middle would be great, and I think that's what you got from CJ Sanders. So look, that's the way it goes. You know, you get the rub of the green, but if it was two other teams playing, I think I just think Dan Jones was poor, really poor, and it's not good enough at this level, you know. And but flip that all over, and you let the emotion drop a little bit from CJ Sanders' point of view, and probably Munster, they were probably seething. And you look at the mistakes they made. And I think in the review, they'll look back, and the referee won't be the dominant factor. It'll be the mistakes they made, the things they did wrong, the accuracy themselves when they had the ball. And then you commend Connacht. You know, Niall Murray was outstanding. Cian Prendergast. These guys are young players who are playing against very experienced provincial players and internationals, and they're the ones that are really stepping up, putting their bodies on the line. Conor Fitzgerald was outstanding at out half as well. Loads of big performances from Connacht. So it seems like it's very unfair, but look, I just think the referee was really poor, and people can say what they like, that I'm saying it biasly or not. You look back at the game, watch it again. There was some very bad decisions, and that'll be brought up in the review when his match is reviewed in the next day or so. Those points will be highlighted, but unfortunately, it's just too late again. So it is what it is. Munster have to try and beat Cardiff and away to Zebra, and hope that somebody beats Benetton. Benetton have. Maybe Connacht can do them a favour when they play Benetton. They go to play them over there next, and then Benetton are away to Ospreys. So, with all due respect,
we've been talking about this, about how important it would be for Munster to win something, and now that the fact that there is going to be a final against the South African side, that would suddenly imbue the competition with an event and a trophy. And as soon as the news came through that there was going to be one of those big occasions, a big final, Munster have fluffed their lines, albeit, as you say, with the difficulty of the referee that they had the other night. All of a sudden, is this a competition that they really want to win again?
It's not the referee isn't the defining factor, but he was an issue. Let's get that straight. I'm not, at the end of the day, that was an issue. They have issues themselves that they crept back into some bad habits again, inaccuracies, lack of ruthlessness when they were close to the line. There was a Dennis Buckley turnover in the second half that, my God, it was. I was the king of offside, and I would have been loving to be in that situation. But look, ultimately, they look at themselves and realise that they didn't manage the game well, and they gave away two very, very poor soft tries of their own making. Shane Daly, the first one, he comes in too close to the pod that's been lifted from the kickoff after scoring, and then Craig Casey gives a loose pass, and the ball is hacked through, and Kieran Marmion scores. So Leinster not getting the bonus points, they got a lifeline by that result, and unfortunately they didn't get the bonus point for themselves, and Munster is still a point ahead of them. So when you look at the table, Benetton are 14, Munster 10, Ospreys 10, Glasgow 10, Leinster 9. So there is a few things that can happen in the last two games, but I think overall it'll be frustrating for Munster, and ultimately this one could cost them a lot, because they do need to win a trophy, as you said, and with all due respect to Benetton, if they get on and get a final, and it looks like it's the Bulls they'll be playing. The Bulls are on 13, Sharks are on 10. It's either Sharks or Bulls, but I think Bulls are in control. The Bulls are in control of that. That would it take away from the competition, or would you say that Benetton deserved to be there? In fairness to Benetton, they had a brilliant win in round one when they beat Glasgow convincingly. Then they played a back-to-back games with Zebra, 2 tight games. They win that. They win both of those. So it'll be interesting the next few weeks. But I think the organisers would prefer maybe a Munster, an Ospreys, a Glasgow or a Leinster to be in that final. But maybe that I'll give a little bit of motivation to Benetton there to continue on and win their 5 games and play the Bulls in the final.
We'll tweet at Benetton Rugby just to make sure.
Oh God, I'll be like you saying Wales are useless before the start of the championship. So
no idea what you're talking about.
We are correct. We're correct. I wanted to ask about Caelan Doris returning to action, because from a Leinster perspective and from an Ireland perspective, actually seeing him back out there, there'd been injuries separate to the concussion that had kept him out of matches recently. But until you actually see him back out there and carrying into contact and offloading and doing all the stuff that we associate with Caelan Doris, it's just this little concern that you haven't seen it for such a long time. It's a huge moment for him and a huge moment really for Irish rugby into the future.
Yeah, he's a class player. I think his tackle count was up in the 20s and a number of turnovers, carries, loads of involvements there. But he came up against a side that were a similar situation to Connacht. Emotion through the roof, backs to the wall. Dan McFarlane looking for a reaction. I thought Ulster were superb. They lacked a little bit of the killer punch in the end for all the good they did, particularly in that first half. But Doris had some big moments in the game, and it's great to see him back, because I think if he gets a couple of games in the next few weeks, he could put himself back in contention to be brought to South Africa if there's an injury. I think he's a wonderful player, and with a real natural feel for the game and a rugby intelligence that, as you say, it was great to see him back out there showing he's the full box of tricks. And I think, it's unfair sometimes to expect too much of certain players when they're out for a period of time, but he's a very, very important player for Leinster going forward and for Ireland.
Like, when you think about that Ireland back row that's almost been missing for a period of time, we probably had arrived at a situation, or we will hopefully arrive at a situation where Caelan Doris and Dan Levy are the 2 best players in their position, and the way in which Ireland play and the way in which Leinster play as well, those 2 absences for such a prolonged period of time can only have had a seismic impact on the fortunes on the pitch.
Yeah, I think, but the players that have come in have stepped up. I think, look at Jack Conan, where he was 6-8 months ago, injured. Talk of him struggling to get on in Leinster. The whole narrative had changed around him, and now he's going on a Lions tour. So things can change pretty quickly. But Doris is a class player. I think that'll be the challenge for Leinster, and a great place for them. They have a British and Irish line and an Irish international, 2 number 8s. Max Deegan is out injured, a brilliant player as well. So much depth there that we speak about a lot. And so to have him back, Doris, playing, performing at that level, and it can only be good news for Andy Farrell and for Leo Cullen. But things can change very, very quickly. I think for me, I would get really excited to see Gavin Coombs involved, Caelan Doris, Jack Conan, these kind of players. But Coombs and Doris, I think having the 2 of them in the same team or being involved with Ireland would be very exciting for the future of the back row and the next generation of guys who are going to maybe take the mantle from the traditional numbers that we see in Stander and O'Mahony in the last number of years. They'll argue that, well, Stander is gone, CJ Stander is gone. Peter O'Mahony will still battle to try and get back in there. There's no reason why he can't be in the mix. But I think Coombs and Doris would excite me to have them in an Ireland back row.
And look, that's one of the reasons why the tour to Fiji being off is really disappointing. I mean, obviously we know why it's often, and that's far more important than the sport itself. But actually, those players going on tour, betting in together, just having that opportunity with the coaching ticket, that's a real pity. I did want to ask one thing about the Champions Cup final. So obviously next week it's Toulouse against La Rochelle. La Rochelle had a pretty easy win at the weekend in build up for this. It's 1 and 2 in the top 14, and it's the finalists in the European Champions Cup. It's a real indicator of where the power in club rugby in Europe is at the moment, and geez, it should be some spectacle.
Yeah, it's a hard one to call. People have asked me, well, obviously my connection with Rog and will La Rochelle do it? I don't know. Toulouse are, a very, very dangerous side, a powerful side who can play some incredible rugby, and they're the ones with all the experience of being here before on many occasions, winning trophies, and that's a lot of that stuff is new to La Rochelle, but the confidence they can take out of beating Leinster and probably the manner of that second half performance will give them huge confidence. It's how they manage and control the game. Sometimes we see finals, Jared, that aren't the classics, they're cagey affairs. It'll be interesting to see how both teams approach it, but it'll be physical, and La Rochelle are a very physical side. Toulouse have big men as well. So, Toulouse are probably going to be favourites given, where they're at and their history and in this competition, their success and their ability to win finals, win the French top 14, all that kind of stuff. But there's a real intrigue to this, and it should be, I suppose, saying it's going to be a classic is contradicting what I'm saying. I don't know. It could be. I hope it is. I hope both teams attack each other because there's so many attacking threats throughout both sides. But, you say this all the time when you play Toulouse, when you play France, Dupont, Intermac, if they get an easy ride from their forwards, they can be devastating. So I'm sure Rog will be trying to, and John O'Gibbs will be trying to put pressure on them and really go after Toulouse up front. But two heavyweights, hard to separate them, and they're the dominant forces at the moment.
Alan, great stuff. Thanks a million.
Cheers, lads. Thanks.
Alan Quinlan there with us every morning here on OTB AM. He'll be back with us on Friday as well for a good old match preview for that and plenty more besides. Let's let you know what's on OTB Sports Radio throughout the day. As ever, this is available on the OTB Sports app. From 1 o'clock, it's OTB Gold with former Donegal footballer Luke Keaney, State of the Union from 3 o'clock. 4 o'clock then is the Classic featuring the Dublin Dons, and from 6 o'clock tonight it is OTB Gold, and our interview with Lance Armstrong from 7 o'clock then off the ball is live on your radio and on the OTB Sports app, which you can get in the App Store right now. It is 11 minutes past 9 on this Monday morning. You're watching OTB AM. We are live in association with Gillette. Good morning start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. We're going to hear from Brian Kerr on Spurs at 9:30, but we are back after these talking football with Anthony Moyles.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
Dad Pod.
This is a video thing as well.
Does have a name? Podcast.
Midlife crisis.
Paddy Daddy.
Midlife crisis.
Dadcast. That's not bad, actually. Yeah.
There was definitely a period of a couple of months where meltdowns were becoming more frequent, and now when she's outside and she's sort of playing with the neighbours' kids, like if she doesn't get her own way, the meltdown is quite extreme. So maybe that's the terrible twos, but I think maybe we've escaped the worst of it.
Well, I think the terrible twos is a bit of a misnomer because it goes into the 3s and 4s.
Dadcast, Tuesdays from 3 p.m. on OTB Sports Radio. Tune in on the OTB Sports app.
First up, a Go Loud original from News Talk.
Get all the news you need to start your day with First Up, the podcast that brings you stories, analysis and interviews with the top newsmakers. First Up, available each weekday morning from 7 a.m. on Go Loud.
Subscribe to this podcast for free on the Go Loud app.
Sean, what's that thing going round the garden?
That is our new Husqvarna Auto Mower.
Auto mower?
Yeah, it's a robotic lawnmower from Husqvarna. Cuts the grass automatically, has GPS tracking and an app. Even works in the rain. I just thought, why spend time cutting grass when I could spend it with the family?
Great right. You can put the dinner on, so.
No can do, love. Have to paint the man cave.
Husqvarna Auto Mower. Never mow again. Learn more at husqvarna.ie.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
Welcome back. It is 13 minutes past 9. We are turning our attention to the opening weekend of the Alliance Football League. Anthony Moyles, good morning.
Morning, Eoin. How are you doing?
Yeah, very well. Let's start and go through this chronologically then. Kerry against Galway on Saturday afternoon was kind of the first game up, 4-21 to 11 points. I think is probably just a scoreline that will have shocked a lot of people, Anthony, mainly because Galway were expected to not screw up the league as badly as they did after the pandemic last year.
Yeah, well, they probably need to start over because, like, I mean, the one thing you can't do, I suppose, coming into a situation playing Kerry, whatever about any other team, but certainly Kerry, you can't bring a lack of intensity into it. And I think Galway just kind of brought that to the party. They came into the game. There was a bit of a kind of a challenge match type feel about it in the first even 5, 6, 7 minutes. Some of the scores Kerry got, Galway guys were close, but not close enough. I think they were abiding by the 2 metre COVID rule. And they certainly kept that going because, just not getting close enough, standing off Clifford, standing off Paddy Clifford, standing off Spillane, standing off fellas out the pitch. And Kerry came with an absolute unbelievable level of intensity. So you had one team which was definitely deficient. You had another team who were mad keen to set a marker and put a marker down, especially after the debacle of last year. And of course that just caused the rift. And you can see what happened. Like, I mean, they just absolutely just blew them apart. And it's worrying for Porrick, because you're facing now next week a Roscommon team that had a decent performance against Dublin, and once you lose that first game, you're on the back foot. So it's worrying for him. I think there will be a response by them, and hopefully there should be. They'll get a fair kick up the behind this week, but Kerry could just do whatever they wanted with them on Saturday, and they did.
The last time I've seen a team try and do this to Kerry, as in just go man-to-man, was Mayo in the Super 8s a couple of years ago, and it ended up being a 10-point win for Kerry. There's a similar pattern here where if you don't have a man in front of that full forward line, they will do damage. But at the same time, Anthony, there are a couple of things from Saturday that maybe we can read into a little bit. One of them is Sean O'Shea playing much closer to goal. So I think we've had conversations on the show, maybe with yourself, about where is the future of Sean O'Shea on the pitch? Is he a midfielder potentially? And it's interesting, I don't think too many people saw this coming, that actually it's gone the other way, that he's gone in a lot closer to goal. He was a target man at times. There was runners going off his shoulder, and he was playing way less on the 40. He didn't really kick past the ball from those deep positions at all. He was right in the mix, and it just created chaos in the full forward line. Like, as you say, this could just be an event that would have occurred behind closed doors with no cameras in an ordinary year. But maybe there was something in this. Maybe there is a future for him closer to that full forward line.
Well, I think it's probably a thing whereby, we definitely have spoken about this before, and it's a situation where, say, if you've the likes of John Small, Mark and Sean, John is very adept at obviously sticking right with you and getting in your shorts, and that doesn't help the likes of Sean O'Shea. He needs that bit of freedom. So, when he was out at 11 and he was really, really being closely man-marked, he couldn't really influence the game as much. So why not then just bring him in closer to goal, rather than bringing him further out the field? Bringing them actually further away from goal, bring them in closer to play, bring them in closer to the danger zone. So then he can actually use now his strength, because you can see it in him. He's really started to physically, get a lot stronger. You can see he's a unit now. He was always tall, but he's starting to get big pair of shoulders on him. And so he's starting to be able to win his own ball, fend off men, kick his own score, or create. And you saw that even from the first goal. He's like, I think it's a very, very smart move. Now, it helped them on Saturday because Moran was obviously kind of being able to play that quarterback role where he was just kind of spraying balls left and right. That would be a different kettle of fish if Moran obviously was in the middle of Croke Park having to actually man-mark, say, someone like a Fenton or, McCarthy or someone like that, whereby he was now having to actually be up in another midfielder's face. So I think it's a great idea, you know, and it's something that they're trying to unearth. So if they find O'Shea in a situation where he's not really influencing the game enough, well, then they can switch him in and maybe put a bit of speed out on that half forward line, just to win a bit of ball. But what was really evident, Owen, is the fact that of the forward power that they had, you know, the two Clifford lads, Spillane, himself, like, I mean, that is 4 forwards that, as a defender, you'd be having nightmares going to bed the night before a game thinking, how are we going to look after these boys the next day?
Not to mention Gainey as well.
Well, yeah, like, I mean, Gainey will do everything that he's always been doing, you know, and I like the idea of him. Like, there's definitely going to be, like, if you remember a couple of years ago, obviously, Dublin were doing this. They were one of the first to bring this rotation system whereby after a score, you know, depending on who took the score and who was in close to goal, that person would just stay in. So you could end up marking, like, I remember one day you might be, you know, you start on Alan Brogan, the next thing you could be on Bernard Brogan, you could have, you know, Conal Keeney on you could have someone else. And there was always and Dublin were kind of looking at basically different matchups, different size, different players ending up on different defenders. You know, you might have a really speedy guy on a bigger guy, whatever it was. But the whole idea was that they were just trying to confuse the defence. And certainly Kerry now have the ability that they can just put forwards anywhere they want and cause mayhem.
Has football arrived at a place where kick passing is now officially back in, Anthony, or is this everybody showing up and you're like, the weather isn't too bad for the league, let's kick the ball a lot? Because it was certainly a rare sight to see Tyrone show up and be like, yeah, we are kicking the letter off the ball today, which was brilliant, don't get me wrong, and I know it's new management, but it's just curious, isn't it, that we're seeing a hell of a lot more kick passing.
Joe, it was great. It was absolutely fantastic. I have to say, it was a fantastic game. I was really impressed by it. You know, and I know there's plenty of the hurling crowd have been bemoaning the fact of the changes in hurling. Now, there's a couple of rules. I can't stand the offensive mark. I still don't like it. I don't particularly like the marking around midfield. I don't like the mark anywhere, to be honest. I think it, and you can see it has an awful. It creates a stop-start situation and removes obviously a lot of intensity. And look, I hate the fact that even as a defender, you know, like, I mean, if a forward wins the ball in front of you, you know, he still has an awful lot to do. So you may have lost that first battle that he has won it. But at the second time, you know, if you're smart enough and you understand his movement and where he wants to get to, you know, it's still an awful lot for a forward to get a shot off. And that was the real ability with the classy forwards, the ability to actually know that they were being double teamed or they had a guy on them who knew their strengths and they were still able to get shots off. So for the mark, I can't stand it. But at the same time, it was really interesting to see Donegal and Tyrone. I'd say if there was 2 marks taken in an offensive situation over the whole game, I think I remember McBurty taking 1. But they just said, no, we're not going to do this. We're just going to play the game as it was destined to be and as it should be. And we're just going to go through, take our ball, take our man on, try to find runners. And the clash of styles, I thought, was really, really interesting. And it was more defined, actually, last weekend than it has been for a while in Donegal-Tyrone games.
Hey, did you want to expand on that a bit? What specifically was the clash here stylistically, especially considering one of the managements on show was a totally new management team?
Yeah, well, I think Tyrone are trying to build. If you look at it, it's amazing the size of the Tyrone forward line now. You know, they've got an awful lot of big men coming in. You know, even the new man Donaghy come in who had a remarkable debut, 10 scores. You know, big man. You know, well able to motor, well able to get around. Does his level of work. You've obviously got Myler in there. You've Donnelly. You've a lot of big guys now. You've obviously hopefully McShane to come back. So you have a situation where you've gone from they were lacking a little bit of size over the last number of years. A few kind of smaller fellas knocking around. Now they've gone to a very, very big physical forward line with a lot of power. And I would imagine the idea there will be, you know, that they have that out ball where they're able to spray a pass. Now, at times it didn't work. Hampsey and a few fellas tried to put in some balls to McKenna and a few times, and they just kind of held up in the air, and they weren't good. But they'll listen. It's only 3 or 4 weeks in. I think they'll adapt that, and I think they will definitely bring that sense to the championship much more. The direct ball in. Now it all depends, obviously, who's kicking it in. They're going to have to get the right guys on the ball. But I'd say that's why they wanted Donnelly coming out around the middle of the field. It's also why they want probably Hart coming from 6. You know, even though he was playing 6, he had an ability where he was able to move off. A man would come in and take his position, hold that central column. Because if you remember, over the last number of years, I've bemoaned the fact that Tyrone have been not easy to take at, but they've conceded a lot of goals by fellas teams just running straight down the middle. And what was really interesting on the weekend was, as soon as Donegal tried to do that nice interlink play that they do, Tyrone made sure that they closed up the middle of the defence, the top of the D, really quickly, and they forced them out. Now they kicked the scores, but they didn't give up the goals. And it seemed to me that there was definitely work being put on that. Donegal on the far side, like, I think they're one of the best. You know, they're top 3, top 4 in the country now at running angles. Like, if you want to go back and just if you're coaching a team, or you're as a forward or as a young lad, and you want to see where you start your runs relative to where you end up, like, the interlink play between them is just fantastic. They've guys running at different angles. They have a lot of screening going on. They have a lot of kind of basketball stuff going on, where they've guys coming around the back. If you get stopped, you turn, you pop it, another fella coming at an angle. And it's very, very difficult to defend against. Tyrone did very well, as I say, to stop goals, but some of the ability and some of the moves around and some of the interlink play by Donegal was fantastic. I thought it was a cracker of a game, and you know, both teams are going to be thereabouts this year.
On the Donegal side of things, we're obviously going to judge this team by what happens when they get to the stage of the season where they failed over the last couple of years, which is not getting to that All-Ireland semi-final. It is incredible to think that the last time they were in an All-Ireland semi-final, they beat Dublin in it, and they haven't been back there since. So it goes beyond the style of play and how they evolve on a mental level as much as anything else this year, Anthony, I suspect. Or are you looking for a step up, footballing-wise, from Donegal this year?
Yeah, like, I think they've been unlucky as well, Eoin, to be honest. You know, they've been hampered by a few big injuries over the last number of years. Like, Murphy is playing very, very well again. The talisman of the team, you know, there's not much more you can say about that guy, but I think they've brought a lot of speed to it. You know, some of the new guys that came on, or who were on Saturday, brought some massive pace to it. They have that ability to carry the ball. They can kick it as well. But I think they've got a number of kind of different, I suppose, darts that they can throw between whether they're playing Murphy inside or outside or whatever it is. McBurty, he was sharp. He wasn't really, really sharp, I would say, last weekend. I think he's you know, a few more games into him, it'll help him. But, like, I mean, I like the way they're evolving. I think they kick when they need to, but they're a hard-running team still, who are very, very well organised in defence. They know when to send fellas forward. They can be very patient. As soon as they get ahead, they can strangle a game on you. I think they've been caught between two stools for the last number of years of trying to transition their game and progress their game, or trying to stick with the traditional game that they've had over the last kind of 7 to 10 years, you know, that Jim McGuinness really brought to the fore. So I think they're getting there. They're getting very, very close to that. And they've added a bit of firepower up front now, and they've got a bit more confidence, I think, in how they're playing. And again, as I say, this ability to be able to run off shoulders and run at different angles, it's very, very difficult to defend against that. Even if you have a packed defence, you know, you really have to go with runners. You have to anticipate actually where a guy is going to end up rather than where a guy has started from. And that's quite difficult to defend against. It's tricky to practice as a squad, but obviously they've put an awful lot of work into it.
On Dublin then yesterday, Anthony, like, they put up 122 in a game, and it could have been more, but it's also the sort of performance where you're looking, say if you're talking about Galway gifting Kerry a heap of goal-scoring opportunities the other day, it feels that Galway or Dublin do not need to be given that gift to put up a score like 122. They will score 122 against you regardless of who you are, regardless of what star defenders your defence is actually made up of. It is a routine thing. It comes from years of experience with these players coming in and playing together in training. And Cormac Costello, I think he scored as much as Clifford actually in the end yesterday. It's just something that we brush off as standard. Like, this is what we've come to expect. 122, a casual 122 almost.
It is, yeah. It's unbelievable. Like, I mean, all the papers, obviously, yesterday and today, you know, they're talking about Clifford, and not really hardly a mention of Costello. It's scary how efficient they are, Owen. You know, it really is scary how efficient they are. I saw a statistic last night. Like, I mean, I can't remember but it was high 80s, I think, of percentage of shots from within the kind of, you know, 25, 30 meter line. They're known to shoot within the D and only shoot within the D, bring the ball in, make sure there's a percentage shot. They have an unbelievable ability to hurt you from every angle. What really impressed me the other day was, again, it's their halfbacks and their ability of the halfbacks to go and go beyond the play. So you have McDade, you have Merchant, you know, it'd be a nightmare as a forward because you're thinking, they're not going to keep going. They're going to stop. They're not going to get this ball. And next thing they just keep going. And they're running flat out, full pace, a la Jack McCaffrey, and they're running beyond the ball, and the ball eventually ends up with them. And what it does is it causes down a defender to make a decision whether he either leaves his man to cover this guy off or whether he just lets him go. If he lets him go, he's going to pretty much run nearly all the way into the net. So if he leaves, of course, the ball is slipped back out. They do these backdoor cuts. They do these little loop arounds. They have all of the various different moves, but they're looking really, really sharp. They've brought in a couple of new guys. You know, the young guy, Lahif, who came on, looks like a unit. So any kind of midfielders out there who are thinking that they'd get a handle on Fenton, now they have another man to try and work out. And, you know, again, you're looking at Costello. Costello, this is a big year for him, you know, not to keep any more pressure on him, but it is. He's been knocking around now for a long time. I'm not sure what age he is, but I'd say he's 27, 28 maybe. And this is a big year. He has an opportunity with Dean Rock injured at the moment. And like, look, you couldn't ask for much more than what he did last weekend. I thought he was really sharp. He looked very focused. His dead ball kicking was excellent, but he was a big threat from normal play. He was very aggressive. He was taking on his man every time, and then he wasn't just happy to dish it off. You know, he was taking shots on, and I thought he worked very, very well with Kilkenny. So you know, this is a big season for him, and again, he's another addition for them. If he's back playing at his best.
He's 27 in July. He's still cresting towards a peak.
He is, Jerry, yeah. And like, I mean, you know, some fellas it just takes that long, you know, and you can feel sorry for him in the sense of he was always thereabouts, but you know, you're coming in against obviously a forward line that has had some of the best players of a generation, and you know, the added pressure of obviously his connections and everything else going on. I don't know if that added any pressure, but you can imagine that obviously the pressure of him being such a star when he was young. That's you know, there was an awful lot of expectation built up on him, you know, and you know, last year didn't end how we would like it to end. This year, you know, he has a fresh start. He's coming in, he's saying, okay, here's an opportunity. And to be fair now, you know, that wasn't easy for him. Even though it's the first game out, he wouldn't have had much preparation coming into that. And you'd imagine Dean Rock is kind of sitting there chomping at the bit. So he had to take it yesterday. And he could have very easily only ended up with 2 or 3 points and being hauled off at halftime or 40 minutes into it. And essentially, that could have been it for him. You know, like, I mean, really, you know, you can't, like, I mean, Dublin don't give you too many chances as a guy. You know, there's enough fellas waiting in the dressing room to take your spot. So I you know, happy for him in the sense that he's come out and he's managed to grab that, and he certainly grabbed the game, and you know, he's put himself right in the frame for the next day. But the next day is the big one for them. This is going to be, it's an awful pity we can't all head down to Thurles and stand even, I don't know, on top of the stand or something, or get somewhere around, because this is going to be an absolute cracker next weekend. Like this, you know, I know Owen won't like me for saying it, but this, Kerry are going to leave some markers down next weekend, and this I believe Dublin will be primed for this. This could be an absolute rip-roar.
There was friends of mine sitting on the wall in Tralee on Saturday afternoon, and they've already looked into getting a cherry picker to get on the wall in Thurles this Sunday. This is a match of that importance. Anthony, I know you were impressed with Armagh as well. We'll have to come back to them another day because we are straight out of time at this point. But thanks a million for taking the call this morning.
No bother, lads. Cheers.
Cheers, Anthony. Anthony Moyles there with us on this Monday morning. 32 minutes past 9. You are watching OTB AM, the sports breakfast show from Off the Ball. If you can't watch us live, the best place to listen to the show is on the OTB Sports app. That's free to download in your app store right now. You can just search for OTB Sports. OTB AM, live in association with Gillette. Good morning, start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. Now, as always, on a Monday morning, we were looking for your suggestions for the performance rankings, and congratulations to David, who picked out his namesake, David Clifford, for the performance rankings, and he wanted to stick him into the green, obviously. So you can join us tomorrow morning from 7:30 as well. Right now, we are bringing you more reaction to the weekend sport. We'll bring you the best of the paper review before 10 o'clock, but first, here is Brian Kerr on Tottenham.
Well, it finished Tottenham 2, Wolves 0, Brian, and I suppose a deserved victory in the end. Wolves were decent enough in the match, but Tottenham probably the team that edged the play and deserved their 2-0 win.
Yeah, I think overall Spurs probably more of a threat in the attacking positions, and that was crucial. The ability of Harry Kane to make room to get a shot and get a shot away quickly and hold players off. In contrast that to young Fabio Silva playing through the middle for Wolves. While he got into good positions to score, he wasn't able to take those opportunities, and ultimately that proved the difference between the sides. I suppose the fact that Spurs had that more of a clinical edge about them in the attacking part of the pitch. They were always a danger with Bale, Dele Alli, Kane and Son, whereas it was very intermittent with Wolves. There was little breakaway opportunities for Fabio Silva and Adama Traore, little bits of Gibbs White, but overall I felt Spurs deserved to win the match once they got the breakthrough goal. And that important period then, just before half time and after half time, they made some great opportunities, and then got the second goal with Højbjerg as well, which just moved a little bit beyond Wolves because they couldn't get the breakthrough. And you look at Wolves overall and say, what's the problem being? They're in 12th position, 2 7th place finishes. They've only scored 35 goals this year in 36 matches, and that tells you the tale.
Just looking at Spurs, and I suppose the goal for them now really is to try and get into the Europa League, because realistically they can't get into the Champions League. The Europa League has become a better competition over the last few seasons. It does seem to be dominated now by English and Spanish clubs. So if you're not going to get into the Champions League, you need to try and get into that, because Conference League for the English Premier League teams isn't really where they want to be. It's a great competition, as you mentioned before our commentary, for Irish clubs, and say for countries like Belarus, Montenegro, these kind of countries. So to avoid the Conference League, I suppose their goal now, and to get into the Europa League, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think they'd be delirious about being in the Europa League. As a club, their aim and their expenditure will put them in the category club that would be expecting to be in the Champions League almost now. But the truth of it is they haven't been in the Champions League that often over the years. I suppose during the Pochettino times, a bit of glory time, and they had 2 or 3 seasons there in the Champions League. Back to Harry Redknapp's days, they had 1 or 2, but they're not regular competitors in the Champions League. So Europa League is probably their level where they're at, given their performances in League. Europa League this year, you said it's become a better competition. It's become a better competition because there's a place available that gets you into the Champions League for the winners the next league, and it's a fallback for those clubs who don't make it into positions in their own league, like the Spanish clubs, the Italian clubs and the English clubs. They've been treating it with a much more serious approach in recent years compared to how they used to treat it in the past, where they used to put out their young players and their second teams. Spurs were still able to put out mix and match teams this year, up until they got knocked out by Dinamo Zagreb 3-0, which was a really poor result. But I think they would take it above being involved in the conference competition. We don't know what that's going to look like, the structure of it. The fact that we're discussing one of the English teams possibly being in it makes it sound a bit better. And if there's 1 or 2 Spanish teams in it and 1 or 2 French teams in it, suddenly becomes, maybe it's not such a bad competition to be involved in. But it won't have the profile or the rewards that the Champions League have for clubs, or I suppose, the satisfaction or the attraction for players to come to a club. If Spurs are trying to attract top-class players next year, it's not going to help them, whether in the Europa League or the Conference, the third-level competition.
And then, of course, the other question is who is going to be signing those players, because it seems to be taking a bit of a while now, this managerial appointment by Daniel Levy. The talk from the club is that they're taking their time to really analyse who's available, or, even if they're not available currently, managers at clubs, who will be the best man to come in and manage Tottenham. Ten Hag at Ajax has signed a new deal with the Dutch club, but they are saying that it doesn't mean he's totally unavailable. Of course, Brendan Rodgers has been mentioned, the Leicester City boss. Graham Potter at Brighton is another man being mentioned. And Roberto Martinez, the former Everton manager, of course, is in charge of the Belgian national team now. Who do you think is the best man? Because Nagelsmann seemed to be the best candidate, but then they lost him.
Well, what I'd say to you is that before they sacked Mourinho, before the League Cup final, they should have thought that through. But that seems now, when you look back at it, I mean, at the time I thought it was a mad one to sack the manager before the cup final, the week before the cup final, and not have anything ready in place. And you look where they are now. Ryan Mason's only a young lad who's only finished playing within the last couple of seasons because of a head injury. He has control of the team, the picking, the coaching, the selection, the players, and whether some players get the hump with him and get annoyed or frustrated because he doesn't fancy them. He's not going to be there too long. And you look at, what else has happened. Chris Powell is there. He's the most experienced person that seemed to be around. Maybe they should have given the job to him. But it sounds like they didn't really think it through, and it was a bit of a rush of blood to somebody's head, and they said, well, we've had enough Mourinho, we get rid of him before the cup in case he wins it. They went out and played against Manchester City as if they were a team playing in Division 4 football, playing against Manchester City. They never had to go, sat back in their own half, hoping on a counter-attack. Mourinho got away with that earlier this year. They won 2-0, but it was a better structured, they were better organised, and there was a real clear plan about it. But it was about getting away with it, which it often was with Mourinho. So they don't seem to have a plan. They're obviously out there divvying around, hoping that they'll come up with someone like Pochettino, who was a bit of a dark horse at the time to come in and worked out to be a very, very good manager for them. So
what do you think they need, Brian? Is it a manager who has experience, who has won a lot of trophies, or should they be looking at a young, ambitious manager, say the likes of Graham Potter, somebody like that?
I would be happier if they got someone who is more experienced. If they could get somebody like Allegri, I think, who has handled a lot of players with big egos and had a lot of success in Italy, and has a style of play that combines effectively the defensive qualities needed to have success and combines attack and play. I think he'd be the type of guy. I think they could do it. But I don't think Spurs is a great attraction to those guys, other than the money that Spurs could pay them. The training ground may be an attraction to the manager. The stadium might be an attraction. The quality of players that they have probably wouldn't. But I think a manager who has had success in the past would look at Spurs and say, there's a lot of potential there. A bit like Mourinho would say, I think I could do it. But I don't know. I don't think Graham Potter has done enough to say he could be successful at Spurs. His career in Sweden was quite impressive. What he's done at Brighton, he's a couple of years at Brighton. But Chris Hughton put a lot of stability into Brighton and put them in a way that they were a very solid team. That they were probably, in good shape. And in fairness with the owner there, Tony Bloom, there's a lot of investment in Brighton. So he's inherited a good situation and he's done well with it. But, I wouldn't be jumping for joy if I was, and I do like Spurs, but I wouldn't be jumping the joy about Graham Potter being the next manager. It's big decisions to be made. I don't know where they're going to go. I think some of the targets they would have liked to get have gone elsewhere, as you mentioned, the Nagelsmann and Ten Hag. So I don't really know what direction, but he needs to get something sorted out and give the manager a chance to assess the players they have now.
Yeah, because he'll need as well to say, for instance, watch the European Championship. You need to see if there's any potential signings there. You'll need to, you need to give him. Because I thought the reason they got rid of Mourinho at that time, obviously they didn't want him managing the cup final because there was talk of a bonus and all that kind of thing. But that it would give a new manager time to assess his squad, to see what he needs, and to make the signings.
Yeah, that's obvious stuff, Stephen. That's obvious stuff, but. I don't know what the
so this all goes back to Levy, doesn't it? And that he just seems to be.
It does, yeah. But it also the owner, Joe Lewis, doesn't seem to be very involved in things. Seems to leave it to Levy to run it as his own play toy. I don't know what other people are involved around the decision-making process or who Levy takes advice from. I hope it's not from the agents of the potential managers or players who he's speaking to, because the agents will tell you what they want to hear, what you want to hear about their own man. They're not impartial. They're not judges of the abilities, rational assessment of the abilities of the various people. So I don't know where he's at and who they're going for, but whoever is going to do it, they should give them a good go and give them a chance of getting off to a reasonable start next season and having a good off-season in terms of the players, assessing the players, seeing them in action for sports, seeing them on the training ground, judging their personalities and whether they fancy them or not.
I want to ask you about just a quick one on Wolves, Brian, because we saw Gareth Southgate in the stands. He actually has an unusual advantage over a lot of managers who are going to be taking part at the Euros this year, is that he's going to see most of his players playing in games in person. And a lot of managers going to the tournament this year don't have that luxury because they might have players, off playing in other countries. Yeah. But just on Conor Cody, because I think he's been one of the most impressive Premier League players of the last few seasons. Very consistent defender, centre half. And it's an area of the field, I think probably centre-half and goalkeeper are probably their two weakest positions, England. Yeah. When you look at the defenders that he has on offer there, Conor Cody must be a leading candidate to start for England in those big games in that tournament.
I wouldn't say he'd be a fairly definite starter. I think the starting pairing will be Stones and Harry Maguire. Okay. John Stones has had a very good season this season. If they go for three centre-backs, they'll probably bring Walker in from the right-back position to play as a third centre-half if he goes that road. But I think on his form this season, Stones has got himself
back in. Would you be worried about Stones without Diaz, say, for instance?
You'd always have a worry about that Stones is capable of a mistake or a blunder. But Harry Maguire has been a very good player for England and Manchester United. He's had a bit of a dip early this season when he had his problems and the issue with the court case in Greece and so on. But overall, he's been very, very steady this season. We saw how Manchester United missed him this week when he wasn't fit to play. So I don't know. I've seen Cody play for England. His pass and delivery, diagonal balls, playing out in centre back, plays better in the three. I think when Wolves played with a three last year, wouldn't be the quickest fella when it goes behind him. We saw it today in how he's exposed on the goal with Harry Kane. The Harry Kane beat him for pace and then beat him for a little bit of agility to move the ball away from him and stick it in the net. So he's coming to it very late into international football, but he will probably be in Gareth Southgate's squad, I would think, as one of the backup players. And you never know what's going to happen if someone gets an injury, and when the build-up matches gets an injury when the group starts, he could be in the team. He's obviously a very strong personality and a fellow that's earned the right to be considered as a decent international player, but it's another step getting into a team that will be expected to win the tournament by their own supporters.
You both in our little WhatsApp group mentioned Ollie Holt. What was good about this, Shane?
Yeah, look, I suppose first of all, Joe, it was just great to get an FA Cup final that kind of really had a sense of occasion about it and really kind of had a sense of meaning, and two teams that desperately wanted to win it. There's enough been wrote about how the FA Cup has certainly demised in importance over years. But look, I suppose first and foremost, it was the return of fans that added so much to the occasion, and there's no doubt that it did. I mean, it's it's not been overly hammed up. I don't think it did lend a serious difference to it, and it did make everybody kind of sit up and take notice, and everybody kind of think this is great to have fans back. And Ollie Holt has, I suppose, he's just done quite well to put that picture across. I wouldn't have known heading into the weekend either that Leicester had never won it. So you have got the underdog tale that feeds nicely into it. Now, that's probably been hammed up a little bit, this whole thing of blow to the big six, Joe. I'm pretty sure they're 7th in terms of wages in the Premier League. So it's not quite this massive giant killing that's been portrayed as either. But no, there was a lot of nice narratives around yesterday. They were still underdogs, absolutely, and the fact they'd never won it before. Then obviously you've had the incident in recent years with the chairman, and it was nice. You couldn't help but smile when you saw the chairman's son on the field joining into the celebrations and that kind of thing. And I suppose just proper celebrations, Joe. Like the Leicester players, like properly celebrated. This was a big moment for them. They were really overjoyed when the final whistle went, and I can't remember the last time I saw a cup final where players reacted like that at the final whistle. And Ollie just encapsulated it all very, very well. I mean, never had seen Leicester players throwing themselves to the turf in unrestrained joy at the final whistle. Felt so stirring, and he's right. So yeah, look, it was a very, very different cup final. And to be honest with you, the overall quality over the course of 90 minutes wasn't fantastic, but it had moments, and that's what an FA Cup final needs. An FA Cup final, a fantastic flowing football that ends in a 1-0 win without any key moments is likely to be forgotten much quicker than a drab enough general game, but with a goal like Tillman's goal and 2 saves like Schmeichel's saves, that will live a lot longer in the memory than the other type of final,
Yeah, I'd agree with that, Rory. I must say, I think our vintage increasingly can remember the 1990s FA Cup finals far better than the last decade, whereas yesterday did feel a bit memorable.
Yeah, absolutely. I like the diminishment of the FA Cup and the cult of the Premier League is just, I think it's terrible. Like the idea of finishing 4th and qualifying for another tournament is better than winning a trophy in Wembley. It just doesn't make any sense to me as a sports fan, and it's just it's become the kind of just the kind of accepted norm at this stage. I know the money is there, but watching Gary Lineker presenting the BBC coverage and not being able to speak, and then just kind of touching on the fact that he just hoped his dad was able, his late father, who'd been to the 4 lost cup finals as a fan, as a Leicester fan, Gary Lineker, Leicester may well finish in the Champions League this year, but that'll give them six group games, maybe a run at the knockouts and a few memories, but it won't give them the fans what they got yesterday. Those players will now have a piece of gold in their pockets that no one can ever take away from them, and that shouldn't be diminished. That's what sport's supposed to be about. You can only win 3 to 4 tournaments. Leicester were entered in 3 tournaments this year. They've won 1 of them. That should be. The league is obviously the be-all and end-all, and it's your bread and butter, all of that sort of stuff. But the FA Cup shouldn't have been diminished. And I think the fact that they were able to get their ducks in a row to get fans into the stadium for this game gave it a prestige that it's lost in the last decade or decade and a half or so. And I hope it's not a once-off. I hope it's not lost. I didn't see the full game. I happily half-time at Longford Bowes coincided with the last 15 minutes of the FA Cup final, so I was able to switch off my gloomy one-camera watch LOI stream for a few minutes and tune into the bright lights of Wembley and a crowd, and going from an empty stadium, and I don't know what Longford Stadium is called anymore. I still call it Flanker Park, whatever it's called now. They an emptied Flanker Park with one camera to this Technicolor and fans crying, and it just looked like real sport again, and I can't wait. I just can't wait. I know I am lucky enough to be in stadiums, and I feel privileged to be at Thomond Park on Friday night, even though it was the Rainbow Cup and there was no one there. But I just can't wait to be in Dalymount Park or Croke Park again with fans there. I can't wait to cover a rugby match with fans there. I hope the Ireland matches this summer will have fans there. It just looked real again. I'm sick of empty stadiums. We put up with it, it's grand, but God, July can't come quick enough It's already too late, but they just need to get this trial underway and get fans back in stadiums, because that looked amazing yesterday.
It did, no, there's no doubt. Lots of GAA as well. We're up and running in GAA, so I'll come to Joe Brolly on David Clifford in a moment. Kerry beat Galway 4-21 to 11 points. That's an eye-catching result. By way of getting there, though, Mark O'Shea, page 77 of the Mail on Sunday, he's basically writing about Kieran McGeeney and Armagh, and McGeeney in action with Armagh for their Division 1 opener this afternoon. First time back in the top tier in some time. But he's just talking about McGeeney, the player, a little bit, and it's just a funny intro more than anything just to mention. So he's talking about Colm Cooper back in 02. I think a lot of us remember Colm Cooper when he was 18, 19, super skinny, coming up against that Armagh team in 02. He ran into Kieran McGeeney, which was like watching a Honda 50 having a head-on collision with the juggernaut, is what Mark O'Shea says. At that moment, there must have been more prayers offered up for the well-being of the Gooch and Kerry than in a season of Sundays at the Vatican. But our boy held his ground. He waited until McGeeney turned his back. Then he momentarily dropped to his haunches in a bid to ease the pain. And while he concealed his discomfort from McGeeney, the rest of us saw it and used it against him in the court of hijinks over succeeding years. Any time Colm Cooper took an innocuous bang in training, he would never be short of comforting advice. Why don't you drop down to your knees there and get your win back? Thing is, in the 06 All-Ireland quarter-final, I got to feel the Gooch's pain. I took off in a solo, burst up the middle, swallowing up the ground with every stride until I was confronted by McGeady. Still, with my momentum as my friend, I assumed I would brush him aside. Instead, I hit the orange wall. I somehow managed to hang on to the ball, but not my dignity. I was still shook from the collision afterwards in the dressing room when I felt a hand on my shoulder and heard a familiar voice in my ear. Mark, boy, advised Gooch, why don't you drop to your knees there and get your win back? So it's a really nice intro from Mark O'Shea, and he goes on to talk about how McGeeney will do with Armagh. Joe Brolly picks up the mantle then on Kerry's win yesterday. Shane, I know you like this.
Yeah. I think you tweeted out the line that I had highlighted already, Joe. His phrase of the only thing worse than being chosen to lead the DUP has been chosen to mark David Clifford. He then goes on to say Liam Silk got the short straw in the changing room beforehand. One is unlikely to volunteer and looked like a 5'5" white guy being asked to guard Michael Jordan. Look, Joe has, as usual, a way with words. Although I don't know how good his German is, Joe. When he tells us that Gergen pressing literally translates as heavy metal football, I'm not so sure he's got the direct translation right there in the opening paragraph. But I mean, to look at the wider point he's making, David Clifford. Look, Joe, as we know, is fond of hyperbole from time to time. I'm sure he wouldn't mind me saying that, but when he says, I have written on many occasions that this kid will become the greatest player the game has ever seen, he provided overwhelming evidence of that again in Tralee. I mean, I don't think that is hyperbole. I really don't think that is hyperbole. He is absolutely phenomenal, Joe. He truly is. Like, I know we're going to touch on Keith Tracy a little later, and you have so many of those stories in soccer, in whatever sport, of those talented kids who 99% of them never fulfill the potential. I mean, nobody was being talked up as much as David Clifford, and yet he's exceeded expectation. Arguably below what he's capable of to a certain extent last year, but it looks as though he's bouncing back super quickly here. I mean, yesterday was the array of finishes. And Joe does well to explain the array of finishes as well. All three goals were so different, and yet obviously, look, the third one was the most eye-catching, but even the previous two to that, just fantastic ability in so many different facets of the game. And you look back at, obviously we had fantastic senior final in 2017, but when I think of 2017, as good and all as the senior final was, you still think of 2017 as David Clifford in a minor final scoring 4-4. I mean, it's phenomenal that he could overshadow a game of that magnitude. And look, I suppose the one thing I'd say is, whatever fight had to be fought to push back the powers of the AFL and keep David Clifford on this soil was a fight that needed to be fought, that's for sure, because their loss has been football's game.
Yeah, for sure. So Kerry score 421, and the gegenpressing, or as Joe Brolly says, heavy metal football. He's celebrating Kerry's approach here, that they're pressing Galway high up the pitch. It's a state of mind. He says yesterday they gave a masterclass in kick passing with the emphasis of the game plan on attacking. They were transformed. So he really liked what he saw from Kerry and their mindset. But as you said, it's about Clifford here, really. He ended up, Clifford, with 3-6 at 22 years of age. If you didn't see the third goal, you will see it many, many times over the next couple of decades. His hat-trick goal, a hilarious, audacious moment that was pure Zidane, reminded us why life is worth living. Talks about the poor fullback climbed forlornly to his feet with muck all over his face, which just about covered the egg. He says of Kerry, they've learned you cannot drop back and defend your way to an All-Ireland. Here, they pressed high throughout, kept the solo running to a minimum, kicked the ball quickly, accurately as a result. Their skilled forwards thrived and the team was motivated and energetic. A dull game plan produces dull football, hence Galway got precisely what they deserved, is what Joe Brolly is saying. As to echo Shane, I saw David Clifford for the first time, Rory, in Croke Park as well. I'd heard the name, I think we'd all kind of heard the name, and I was preparing for the paper review. So you're reading papers and you're on air a little bit, and it's suddenly 1 goal and then 2 goal, and you're glancing up a bit more at this kid, 3 goal. 4th goal, and you're stopping reading the papers and you're looking around and you're realising all the hype for once, you know what I mean, for once is justified. And I do remember, I won't name the person, I do remember someone saying, well look, that's minor, let's see how he gets on at senior before we get too excited. A prophecy which hasn't quite come to fruition. And I mean, there is something so interesting about this. The most celebrated underage footballer I can ever remember, more than Gooch, more than anyone, now arriving on the senior scene and instantly looking awesome and getting better with each passing moment, it seems. 22 years of age. This is just so interesting, phenomenal to watch. As Joe Brolly says, he thinks we're watching the player who will go down as the greatest footballer of all time. And God, I mean, I can't think of too many players who've had that billion for so long and then delivered straight away, and so far so good, you know.
Yeah, and I think the most interesting part, maybe because of where I'm from, is that he's not on the greatest team of all time. His mission is to bring down the greatest team of all time. And what Joe talks about in Kerry's tactics is kind of speaks to that kind of mission that he and the rest of his team are on, is to ultimately bring down the Dublin juggernaut. And Colin O'Rourke touches on that in his piece, and Mick Clifford has a piece on Dublin as well. And Dublin loom large over, you know, all of the GAA coverage, and you know, Joe Brolly talks about, you know, Dublin's tactics as well and how they perfected his idea of GAA gegenpressing. And if Kerry are to do this, and they do look like the most likely team to do it, Clifford will be central to that. And Dublin have shown that, he has shown that he's been able to trouble that Dublin juggernaut in the past. And the 2020 All-Ireland, the drawn All-Ireland final, which one of the greatest games I've ever attended, a day when Kerry did press high and did bring the fire to Dublin, and then seemed to get scarred by the replay game, which kind of their tactics which followed that seemed to spoil last year. Brolly is suggesting that maybe they've come out of that fog after losing to Cork, and they've reassessed where they're going with it. And you know, the scoreline they put up yesterday and the way they freed Clifford to do it, I didn't see the game, but obviously he scored that much. They must have freed him to some point. Bodes well for that mission that they're on. And yeah, he's pretty compelling. Don't remember really hearing him speak very much or reading much about him, but without ever giving any, you know, I don't know a whole lot about him as a person, but the player himself, between the white lines, is compelling enough. He's worth watching whenever Kerry are playing. Like you tune in to see what he's going to do next, and that's what sports people really should be all about. Yeah.
OTB AM
with Gillette. Put your best face forward.